Some people spend their whole lives hiding behind walls they built to survive. Lauren Hale was one of them, until the night she fell into freezing water and the man who pulled her out refused to look away from what she'd been concealing. This is the story of a rescue that saved more than just a life, of scars that told the truth when words failed, and of a single father and a broken CEO who learned that real love doesn't demand perfection, it demands presence. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below and hit that like button so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you to a cold October evening by the Alder River, where everything changed in the time it takes to fall. The rain had started as a whisper 3 hours ago, but by the time Ethan Cole and his daughter reached the river path, it had become an accusation, cold, insistent, seeping through the seams of his jacket and into the places where worry already lived. His arm curved protectively around Maya's small shoulders as they walked, her 7-year-old frame tucked against his side like a secret he was determined to keep safe. "Dad, my legs are tired," Maya said, her voice thin in the way that meant pain, not complaint. Ethan slowed immediately, his free hand moving to support more of her weight. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little further to the car, okay? You did so good at therapy today." She had too. 45 minutes of exercises that would have broken most adults, all to coax damaged nerves into remembering how to do what they'd once done without thought. The tumor they'd removed 2 years ago had saved her life, but stolen easy movement from her left side. Every step she took now was a negotiation. Every physical therapy session a battle she fought with more grace than he could comprehend. "The river's loud tonight," Maya observed, her attention shifting with the mercurial focus of childhood. She was right. The Alder River ran alongside the path, swollen from days of rain, its surface dark and churning with a violence that seemed personal. The sound of it filled the October evening, a roar that drowned out the city traffic beyond the parkland, that made the world feel reduced to just this: the path, the water, the rain, and the two of them moving through it all. Ethan had chosen this route because it cut 10 minutes off their walk to the parking lot, but he was regretting it now. The street lamps along the path created pools of amber light that barely pushed back the gathering darkness, and the river's edge seemed closer than he remembered, the safety railing suddenly insufficient against the water's reach. "Let's move away from the edge," he said, guiding Maya toward the inland side of the path. That's when he saw her. A woman stood at the railing about 30 yards ahead, her silhouette sharp against the gray evening. Even from a distance, even in the rain, she looked out of place. The cut of her coat too tailored, her posture too rigid, everything about her screaming city boardroom rather than Riverside Park. She wasn't moving, wasn't walking, just standing there with both hands gripping the rail as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. Ethan's boo slowed instinctively, some primal part of his brain registering wrongness in her stillness. People didn't stand like that in the rain unless something was very wrong. "Dad?" Maya's voice carried a question. "Hold on, honey." He was about to call out to ask if the woman needed help when she moved, but it wasn't the movement of someone stepping back from the rail, resuming a walk, returning to normalcy. It was the movement of someone letting go. She climbed onto the lower rail with a kind of terrible precision, her expensive heels finding purchase on wet metal, her hands releasing their grip. For one suspended moment, she stood there, balanced on the edge between one world and another, and Ethan could see her face in the lamplight, eyes closed, expression smoothed into something almost like peace. Then she stepped forward into empty air. "Stay here!" Ethan's command came out sharper than he'd intended, his hands already settling Maya onto a nearby bench, even as his body turned toward the river. "Don't move, Maya! Stay right there!" He was running before he'd finished speaking, his boots hammering against wet pavement, his heart hammering against his ribs. The woman hit the water with a sound that was somehow both violent and quiet, and then the river had her, pulling her under with the efficiency of something that had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Ethan reached the railing and didn't hesitate. Hesitation was a luxury for people who hadn't spent 2 years watching their daughter fight for every breath, every movement, every day. Hesitation was for people who hadn't learned that sometimes the only thing between life and death was the willingness to act when action seemed impossible. He vaulted the rail and jumped. The cold hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs, turning his muscles to stone. The Alder in October was maybe 50 degrees on a good day, and this wasn't a good day. The water closed over his head, dark and disorienting, full of currents that pulled in directions that defied logic. Ethan forced his eyes open despite the sting, forced his arms to move despite the cold. He couldn't see anything. The water was too dark, too churned with sediment and debris. But he knew approximately where she'd gone in, knew the current would have pulled her downstream, knew he had maybe seconds before the cold took them both. His hand hit something solid, fabric, a shoulder, the shape of a human form, and he grabbed her, wrapping his arm around her torso and kicking hard for what he hoped was up. The current fought him, tried to tear her away, tried to pull them both under and downstream and into the darkness that waited beneath the surface. But Ethan had spent 2 years fighting for his daughter's life in hospital rooms and therapy sessions and midnight vigils. He knew how to fight when fighting seemed futile. He knew how to hold on when holding on was the only option left. His head broke the surface and he gasped, dragging in air that tasted like rain and river water and survival. The woman in his arms wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, was just dead weight against his chest. The current had them now, pulling them downstream faster than he could swim against it, the banks rushing past in a blur of darkness and lamplight. "Help!" He tried to shout it, but the word came out ragged, barely audible over the river's roar. "Somebody help!" There was a curve ahead where the river bent and a concrete embankment jutted into the water. He could see it coming, could see it was his only chance. Ethan angled toward it, kicking with everything he had left, one arm locked around the woman, the other arm pulling against the current with strokes that sent fire through his shoulders. The embankment rushed up, and he hit it hard, his shoulder taking the impact, pain exploding through his body. But his free hand found purchase on the concrete edge, found a grip that held, and he used it to drag them both out of the main current and into the slower water against the wall. "Come on," he gasped, talking to himself, to her, to the universe. "Come on, come on." He got one arm over the embankment edge, then the other, hauling her up with strength he didn't know he had. She was small, but she was unconscious and soaking wet, and every inch he pulled her upward felt like lifting the weight of the world. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned, and the cold was starting to make his movements clumsy, uncoordinated. But he got her onto the concrete, got himself up after her, rolled her onto her back, and immediately started checking for breathing, for a pulse, for any sign that he hadn't been too late. Nothing. No breath, no movement, her lips already tinged blue in the lamplight. Ethan's hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory from a CPR certification he'd gotten years ago taking over when conscious thought became too slow. 30 compressions, hard and fast, his palms centered on her sternum, her expensive blouse tearing under the pressure. 2 rescue breaths, her head tilted back, his mouth covering hers, breathing for her because she couldn't breathe for herself. "Come on," he said again, between compressions. "Don't you dare give up now. Don't you dare." 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. The rain poured down on them both, and somewhere in the distance he could hear Maya calling for him, her voice high with fear, but he couldn't stop, couldn't even respond, because this woman's life depended on him not stopping. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. She convulsed suddenly, water erupting from her mouth as her body fought to expel the river from her lungs. Ethan rolled her onto her side, supporting her as she coughed and choked and gasped, as she fought her way back from wherever she'd been. "That's it," he said, his voice shaking with cold and adrenaline and relief. "That's it. Just breathe. You're okay. You're going to be okay." She was shaking violently, her whole body racked with shivers, her breathing coming in ragged gasps between coughs. But she was breathing. She was alive. "We need to get you to a hospital," Ethan said, already reaching for his phone, already trying to figure out how to call for help while his hands shook so badly he could barely grip the device. "No." The word came out hoarse, barely audible, but absolutely firm. "No hospital." "You almost died. You need no hospital." She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her eyes opening to meet his. They were gray, he noticed distantly, gray like the river, gray like the evening sky. "Please. You could have hypothermia. You could have water in your lungs. You need medical attention." I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She could barely speak without coughing, could barely hold herself upright. I need to get warm, that's all. That's not all. You jumped into a river. I fell. Her eyes held his, and he saw something in them that made him pause. Not deception exactly, but a kind of desperate negotiation. I fell. It was an accident. I was looking at the water and I slipped. That's what happened. They both knew that wasn't what happened. But before Ethan could press the point, he heard footsteps pounding on pavement and turned to see Maya running toward them, her gait uneven but determined, her face streaked with tears. Dad! Dad! Are you okay? He met her halfway, scooping her up despite his shaking arms, despite the cold making his movements awkward. I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm okay. I told you to stay on the bench. You were gone too long. I got scared. She buried her face against his neck, her small body trembling. You jumped in the water. Why did you jump in the water? Because someone needed help. He carried her back toward where the woman still sat on the concrete, her arms wrapped around herself, her whole body shaking. Maya, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. The woman looked up at them, and Ethan saw her expression shift as she took in Maya, the child's uneven posture, the careful way she held her left arm, all the subtle markers of someone who'd fought hard battles. Something in the woman's face softened, cracked, became briefly vulnerable before she locked it down again. Lauren, she said quietly. My name is Lauren. I'm Ethan. This is my daughter, Maya. He set Maya down carefully, keeping one hand on her shoulder. Lauren, you're hypothermic. We all are. We need to get somewhere warm, and you need medical attention. I told you. I know what you told me. I also know that I pulled you out of that river, which means I have a vested interest in making sure you don't die of exposure in the next 30 minutes. His voice came out harder than he'd intended, the adrenaline and fear crystallizing into something sharp. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me where you live or where you want to go, and I'm going to make sure you get there. And then you're going to get warm and dry, and if you won't go to a hospital, you're at least going to promise me you'll call a doctor. Do we understand each other? Lauren stared at him for a long moment, and he watched her calculate, consider, weigh options with the kind of rapid-fire assessment that spoke of someone used to making high-stakes decisions. Finally, she nodded. I live close to here. 10 minutes. There's a car service I use. I can call them. Can you stand? She tried. Got about halfway up before her legs gave out, the hypothermia and shock and near-death experience all conspiring to rob her of the strength she was trying to project. Ethan caught her, his arm around her waist, steadying her against his side. Okay, he said. New plan. Maya, honey, can you walk if I'm helping Lauren? His daughter nodded, her face serious in the way that meant she understood this was important. I can walk, Dad. The next 10 minutes existed in a kind of surreal haze. Lauren made the call to her car service with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold the phone. They made their way to the street, 3 soaking wet people moving through the rain like survivors of some disaster, which Ethan supposed they were. The car that arrived was sleek and black and utterly incongruous with their current state. The driver's eyes widened when he saw them, but he didn't ask questions, just held the door and cranked the heat the moment they were inside. Lauren gave an address that made the driver's eyebrows rise slightly, and they drove in silence through streets that gleamed with rain and streetlight. Maya had curled against Ethan's side, her shivers gradually subsiding in the car's warmth, her eyes starting to drift closed from exhaustion and delayed shock. The building they stopped in front of was glass and steel and money, one of the new luxury high-rises that had sprouted along the waterfront in recent years. The kind of place where the doorman wore a suit and the lobby looked like an art gallery. This is me, Lauren said quietly. The doorman's professional expression cracked slightly when he saw them, but he recovered quickly, holding the door and greeting Lauren by name as if she often returned home soaking wet and accompanied by strangers. The lobby was all marble and modern art, their wet footsteps echoing as they crossed to the elevator. Lauren pressed the button for the penthouse. Of course it was the penthouse. They rode up in silence, the elevator so smooth Ethan barely felt the movement. Maya had fallen asleep against his side, her breathing deep and even, her small body finally relaxing now that warmth and safety had been restored. He looked down at her and felt his heart clench with love and fear and the familiar helplessness of knowing he couldn't protect her from everything, couldn't save her from pain, could only be present for it. When he looked up, Lauren was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "How old is she?" Lauren asked softly. 7? She's brave. She's had to be. The words came out more bitter than he'd intended, and he immediately regretted them. "Sorry, it's been a long day. You just jumped into a freezing river to save a stranger. I think you're allowed to sound tired." The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment that was all windows and views, the city spreading out below them like a circuit board of light. Lauren moved through the space with automatic familiarity, heading toward what looked like a bedroom suite. "There's a guest room through there," she said, pointing to a door on the opposite side of the living area. "Bathroom attached. You should get your daughter warm and dry first." "What about you?" "I'll be fine. I just need—" She trailed off, swaying slightly where she stood. Ethan made a decision. "Maya, sweetheart, wake up for just a minute." His daughter stirred, blinking up at him with confused eyes. "We're going to get you into some dry clothes, okay? And then you can sleep." He carried her to the guest room, which turned out to be larger than his entire apartment, and decorated with the kind of careful neutrality that spoke of professional design. The attached bathroom had heated floors, and towels that were probably worth more than his car. It took 15 minutes to get Maya out of her wet clothes, dried off, and wrapped in towels and a bathrobe he found in the closet. She was asleep again almost before he'd finished, curled up in the massive bed like a small comma. He stood there for a moment, just watching her breathe, making sure her color was good, that her breathing was easy, that the cold hadn't hurt her. Then he went to check on Lauren. He found her in the master bedroom, still in her wet clothes, sitting on the edge of the bed with her arms wrapped around herself. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering, but she hadn't moved to change, hadn't moved to do anything. She just sat there, staring at the floor, her wet hair dripping onto expensive hardwood. "Lauren." She didn't look up. Ethan crossed the room and crouched in front of her, putting himself in her line of sight. "Lauren, you need to get out of these wet clothes. You're hypothermic." "I know." Her voice was distant, detached. "I know what I need to do." "Then why aren't you doing it?" She finally looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten, a kind of hollow exhaustion that went beyond physical cold, beyond the trauma of nearly drowning. It was the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting too long, who'd used up all their reserves, who didn't know how to take even one more step. "I can't." She swallowed hard. "I can't get the buttons. My hands won't stop shaking." It was such a small thing, such a simple, human thing. But he could see what it cost her to admit it, could see the shame and frustration and defeat written across her face. "Okay," Ethan said gently. "Okay, let me help." He moved slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to refuse. His hands went to the top button of her blouse, the fabric stiff with river water and cold. The button was small, ornate, designed for aesthetics rather than function, and his own hands were still shaking enough to make the task difficult. But he managed it. One button, then another, working his way down with careful focus, keeping his eyes on the task, giving her privacy even as he helped with something impossibly intimate. He got to the fourth button and stopped. The skin beneath the fabric was scarred, old scars, the kind that spoke of serious burns, extensive burns, the kind that required surgeries and skin grafts and years of healing. They covered her left side, from what he could see, disappearing beneath the fabric, telling a story she'd clearly spent years trying to hide. Ethan's hand stilled for just a moment, but he didn't pull away, didn't react, just continued unbuttoning with the same careful attention he'd shown before. When he finished, he stepped back. "Can you manage from here?" he asked quietly. Lauren nodded, her arms coming up to hold the blouse closed, her eyes not quite meeting his. "I'll be in the living room. Call if you need anything." He left, closing the door behind him, giving her the privacy she needed. He found himself standing in the massive living room with its wall of windows, looking out at the city below, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. A woman had jumped into a river. He had jumped in after her. He had saved her life. And now he was standing in her penthouse, soaking wet, while his daughter slept in a guest room, and the woman he'd rescued tried to put herself back together behind a closed door. The whole thing felt unreal, like something that had happened to someone else, some character in a story he was watching rather than living. He should call someone, should check on Maya again, should get out of his own wet clothes before he developed hypothermia too, should do 100 things that made logical sense. Instead, he just stood there, watching rain stream down the windows, listening to the quiet sounds of the city muted by expensive glass and elevation. Ethan! He turned to find Lauren standing in the bedroom doorway. She'd changed into sweats and a long-sleeved shirt, her hair wrapped in a towel, her feet bare against the hardwood. She looked smaller somehow, younger, all the sharp edges of her business attire stripped away to reveal something more fragile underneath. "There are clothes in the guest room closet," she said. "They should fit you. They're men's clothes. Extra things I keep for—" She trailed off, waving a hand vaguely. "Just in case." "Thank you." "And there's a first aid kit in the bathroom. You're bleeding." He looked down and realized she was right. There was a gash on his forearm he hadn't even noticed, the adrenaline having muted the pain. Now that she'd pointed it out, he could feel it throbbing in time with his heartbeat. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Sit down. I'll get the kit." "Lauren, you almost died tonight. I can handle a cut." She crossed the room with surprising speed, her gray eyes fierce. "You jumped into a river to save me. The least I can do is put a bandage on your arm. Sit down." There was steel beneath the exhaustion, a core of strength that had somehow survived whatever had driven her to that railing. Ethan sat. She returned with the first aid kit, which turned out to be more like a first aid station, fully stocked with everything short of surgical equipment, and knelt beside the couch where he'd settled. Her hands were steadier now as she cleaned the cut, applied antiseptic that stung more than he wanted to admit, wrapped it with professional efficiency. "You've done this before," he observed. "I've had practice." She tied off the bandage, her fingers lingering on his arm for just a moment before pulling away. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She sat back on her heels, looking up at him with those gray eyes that seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have—" "No." The word came out sharp, certain. "No, they wouldn't have. Most people would have called 911 and waited for professionals. Most people wouldn't have jumped in. Most people wouldn't have—" She stopped, looking away. "You didn't have to do what you did." "Yes, I did." She looked back at him, questioning. "I have a daughter," Ethan said simply. "I know what it's like to fight for someone's life, to refuse to give up even when giving up would be easier. I know what it's like to love someone enough to do impossible things. And I look at you, and I see someone who needed someone to fight for them tonight. So yes, I did have to jump in. Because the alternative was unthinkable." Lauren's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she looked away quickly, standing and moving to the windows. "You should get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia. And your daughter, you should check on her." "I will." He stood, but didn't move toward the guest room. "Lauren, what you said earlier about falling, we both know that's not what happened." Her back stiffened, her shoulders rising defensively. "I'm not going to report you," Ethan continued gently. "I'm not going to call anyone or force you to do anything, but I need to know. Are you going to try again?" The silence stretched long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then, quietly, "I don't know." At least it was honest. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay. Then I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer." She turned to look at him, her expression wary. "Would you be willing to talk to someone? A therapist? A counselor? Someone who specializes in helping people who are where you are right now?" "I have therapists. I have an entire team of professionals who help me manage my life and my career and my public image. What I don't have is—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter." "What don't you have?" She laughed, and it was one of the saddest sounds Ethan had ever heard. "What don't I have?" "That would be a shorter list." "Try me." "Why?" The word came out almost angry. "Why do you care? You don't know me. You pulled me out of a river, and that was incredible, and I'll be grateful for it for the rest of my life, however long that turns out to be. But you don't owe me anything beyond that. You don't owe me your concern or your time or your... My what? She gestured helplessly. Your presence. People don't just stay. Not when things get complicated. Not when they see... She touched her left side unconsciously, where the scars lay hidden beneath her shirt. See what? That you're human? That you've been hurt? That you've survived something terrible? That I'm damaged. The words came out flat, final. That underneath all of this, she gestured at the penthouse, at herself, at the carefully constructed life around them. I'm just broken pieces held together by sheer stubborn will and very expensive therapy. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering his next words carefully. Can I tell you something about my daughter? Lauren blinked at the change in direction but nodded. 2 years ago, Maya was diagnosed with a brain tumor. The surgery to remove it was successful, but it left her with nerve damage. Her left side doesn't work the way it should. She has to do physical therapy 3 times a week just to maintain the function she has. She'll probably never run the way other kids do, never ride a bike without special equipment, never do 100 things that other 7-year-olds take for granted. He moved to stand beside Lauren at the window, both of them looking out at the rain-soaked city. And you know what I see when I look at her? I see the bravest person I've ever met. I see someone who fights every single day, who doesn't give up even when giving up would be so much easier. I see someone who's been through hell and came out the other side with her kindness intact, with her smile intact, with her ability to love intact. That's different, Lauren said quietly. She's a child. She's innocent. And you're not? I'm the CEO of a major corporation. I make decisions that affect thousands of lives. I'm powerful and successful, and I have everything anyone could possibly want. I have no right to... Her voice cracked. I have no right to feel this way. Pain doesn't care about your resume, Lauren. Depression doesn't check your bank account balance before deciding whether you deserve to feel it. He turned to face her fully. Whatever brought you to that railing tonight, whatever made jumping into a freezing river seem like a viable option, that's real. That's valid. And it deserves to be addressed by something more than willpower and expensive suits. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face, her whole body trembling with more than just cold. You don't understand. If people knew, if my board knew, if my competitors knew, they would destroy me. Everything I've built, everything I've fought for, it would all be gone. So you'd rather be gone instead? The question landed like a physical blow, and he saw her flinch. I'm sorry, Ethan said immediately. That was too harsh. No. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. No, you're right. That's exactly what I was thinking tonight. That being gone would be easier than facing... She gestured vaguely. All of this. And now? Now I'm terrified, she admitted. Because you saw. You saw the scars, and you saw me fall apart, and you saw all the ways I'm not the person I pretend to be. And you're still standing here, and I don't know what to do with that. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. It was small and cold in his, her fingers trembling. What if you didn't have to do anything with it? What if you could just accept it? Accept that someone saw you at your worst and didn't run. People always run, she whispered. Eventually. Some people do, he agreed, but not all people. Not always. She looked down at their joined hands, and he could see her struggling with something, some question she wanted to ask but was afraid to voice. Finally, she looked up at him, her gray eyes vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. If you really saw me, she said quietly, if you saw all of it, not just the scars on my skin, but the scars on everything else, all the broken pieces and the damaged parts, and the ways I'm held together with nothing but stubborn refusal to admit defeat, would you stay? Or would you do what everyone else does and find a reason to leave before it gets too complicated? It was the question beneath the armor, the fear beneath the carefully controlled exterior. And Ethan understood suddenly that this wasn't about him, not really. This was about everyone who'd ever looked at her brokenness and decided it was too much, too complicated, too difficult to navigate. I don't know, he said honestly. and he felt her start to pull away. He tightened his grip on her hand, keeping her there. I don't know because I don't know what all of it is yet. I don't know your story. I don't know what you've survived or what you're still surviving. But I can tell you this. I jumped into a river tonight to pull you out. I did CPR in the rain. I got you here, made sure you were safe, made sure you weren't alone. And I'm still standing here holding your hand, having this conversation. He paused, making sure she was really hearing him. I'm not promising forever, Lauren. I can't promise that because forever is a long time and we're basically strangers who met under the worst possible circumstances. But I can promise tonight. I can promise that right now, in this moment, I'm not going anywhere. And if you need me to promise tomorrow too, I can do that. One day at a time, one moment at a time, until the promises start to feel less terrifying and more like possibility. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope and fear and disbelief all tangled together. You're serious. I'm serious. You're a stranger who pulled me out of a river. You have a daughter sleeping in my guest room. You have your own life, your own problems, my own understanding of what it's like to feel broken. He interrupted gently. My own experience with fighting battles that seem unwinnable. My own knowledge of what it's like to need someone to see you at your worst and not turn away. He squeezed her hand. We all carry scars, Lauren. Yours just happen to be visible. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her calculating again, weighing risks, trying to decide if she could trust this, trust him, trust the possibility of not being alone with her pain. Finally, she said, I should let you check on your daughter and get into dry clothes, and... She pulled her hand free, wrapping her arms around herself again. Thank you. For everything. For saving my life and for this, whatever this is. This is two people having an honest conversation, Ethan said. Nothing more complicated than that. Everything is more complicated than that? Maybe, but we don't have to figure out all the complications tonight. He headed toward the guest room, then paused at the door. Lauren, that question you asked me, about whether I'd stay if I saw all of you? She looked at him, waiting. Ask me again tomorrow, and the day after. Keep asking until the answer starts to feel real. He didn't wait for her response, just slipped into the guest room where Maya was still sleeping peacefully. He stood there in the darkness, listening to his daughter breathe, trying to process everything that had happened, everything that was still happening. He jumped into a river tonight to save a stranger's life, but standing in this penthouse, having that conversation with a woman who was clearly drowning in ways that had nothing to do with water, he realized that the rescue might not be over yet. It might, in fact, have only just begun. Ethan woke to unfamiliar silence and the kind of darkness that only came from blackout curtains designed to cost more than most people's monthly rent. For a disoriented moment, he couldn't remember where he was, why his muscles ached like he'd been hit by a truck, why his throat felt raw and his lungs burned with every breath. Then it came back in a rush. The river, the cold, the woman on the railing, the CPR in the rain, all of it. He sat up carefully, trying not to disturb Maya, but when he looked over at the enormous bed, he found it empty. Panic spiked through him, sharp and immediate, before he heard her voice drifting in from the other room. And then the dragon said he was sorry for burning down the village, but he was just really cold and nobody had taught him about asking for blankets. Lauren's laugh was soft, genuine. That's a very considerate dragon. Dad says the best stories are the ones where everybody learns something, even the dragons. Ethan pulled on the borrowed clothes he'd found last night, expensive casual wear that fit surprisingly well, and made his way to the living room. The morning light streaming through the wall of windows was brutal in its clarity, revealing a city washed clean by rain and a view that probably cost more per month than his annual salary. Maya was curled up on the couch next to Lauren, both of them wrapped in blankets, a spread of breakfast pastries on the coffee table between them. His daughter looked better than she had last night, color back in her cheeks, her movements easier in the way they always were after a full night's sleep. "Dad!" She brightened when she saw him. "Lauren makes really good hot chocolate. It has cinnamon." "Does it?" He crossed to them, pressing a kiss to the top of Maya's head, checking her temperature with the back of his hand in the automatic gesture of a parent who'd spent too many nights in hospitals. "Normal." Thank God. There's coffee, Lauren said, gesturing toward the kitchen, and food. I wasn't sure what you'd want, so I had them send up a selection. Them? The building has a restaurant. They deliver to the residences. She said it matter-of-factly, as if having restaurant service in your apartment building was the most normal thing in the world. Ethan poured himself coffee from a machine that probably cost more than his car and returned to the living room, taking in the scene. Lauren looked better than she had last night, too. Her hair was dry, her color less concerning, though there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. She was wearing the same sweats and long-sleeved shirt, her arms wrapped around herself even in the warmth of the apartment, her body language still defensive despite the casual setting. "What time is it?" he asked. "Almost 9. I let you sleep. You both seemed like you needed it." 9. He had work at 11, a shift at the warehouse that he couldn't afford to miss. Maya had school, though he could probably excuse one day given what they'd been through last night. "I should call us a car," he said. "Get out of your hair." "You don't have to rush." Lauren's voice was carefully neutral. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. We've imposed enough. You saved my life. I think that entitles you to breakfast at minimum." Maya looked between them with the kind of sharp awareness children had when adults were having a conversation beneath the conversation. "Are you okay, Miss Lauren? You seem sad." Leave it to a 7-year-old to cut straight through all the polite deflection. Lauren's expression softened, and she reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind Maya's ear with surprising gentleness. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just tired. It was a long night." "But Dad says when you're tired, sometimes your feelings get extra loud, and that's okay because feelings are supposed to be loud sometimes." "Your dad sounds very wise." "He is. He knows lots of stuff about feelings because he cries sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep, but I'm not really asleep. I'm just resting my eyes." Ethan felt his face heat. "Maya, it's okay, Dad. Lauren cried last night too. I heard her when I got up to use the bathroom." Maya looked at Lauren with complete seriousness. "Dad says crying means you're brave enough to let the sad out instead of keeping it trapped inside where it can make you sick." Lauren's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears, and she blinked rapidly, looking away. "Your dad is right about that too." They sat in silence for a moment, the morning light painting everything in shades of gold and promise that felt at odds with the weight in the room. Ethan watched Lauren struggle with her composure, watched her build the walls back up brick by brick, and he recognized it for what it was. The automatic response of someone who'd learned that vulnerability was dangerous, that showing cracks meant giving people weapons to use against you. "I should get ready for work," Lauren said finally, standing abruptly. "I have a board meeting at 10. "Lauren, thank you for staying last night, and for everything." She was already moving toward her bedroom, already retreating into the armor of professional courtesy. "Let yourselves out whenever you're ready. The doorman will call you a car." She disappeared into the bedroom, and Ethan heard the door close with a finality that felt like a statement. "She's scared," Maya observed, reaching for another pastry. "Yeah, honey, she is." "Of us?" "No. Of herself, I think. Of what it means to let people see her when she's not okay." Maya considered this, chewing thoughtfully. "That's silly. Everybody's not okay sometimes. That's why we have people who love us. So we don't have to be okay all by ourselves." Out of the mouths of babes. Ethan pulled his daughter close, marveling at her wisdom, at the way she could cut through complexity and find the simple truth underneath. "You're right. That is why we have people. So we should be her people," Maya said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, since she doesn't seem to have very many. "Sweetheart, it's more complicated than that. We don't really know her, and she's dealing with things that are very private, very personal. We can't just—" "Dad?" Maya looked up at him with those serious eyes that were too old for her age. "You jumped in a river to save her. That means she's ours now. That's how it works." "That's not how it works." "Yes, it is. You taught me that. You said when you choose to help someone, really help them, not just because you have to, but because you want to, that makes them part of your family. Your family of choice, not your family of blood, but family anyway." He had said that, hadn't he, in one of their late-night conversations about why they took care of each other. why family meant more than DNA and genetics. He'd been trying to explain why Mrs. Chen from downstairs wasn't related to them, but still counted as family because she watched Maya when he had to work late, because she brought them soup when Maya was sick, because she showed up when it mattered. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, you're right. So we're staying? I don't think Lauren wants us to stay, honey. I don't think she knows what she wants. Maya pulled away from him, her expression determined in a way that usually meant trouble. I'm going to go tell her we're not leaving yet. Maya. But she was already up, already heading toward the bedroom door with that uneven gait that was pure stubborn determination. She knocked, which was more courtesy than Ethan would have expected, but she didn't wait for an answer before opening the door. Miss Lauren, Dad and I decided we're staying for a little while because you seem like you need people, and we're good at being people for people who need them. Ethan was on his feet immediately, moving to intervene, to apologize, to extract his well-meaning but boundary-challenged daughter from what was clearly a private space. But when he reached the doorway, what he saw stopped him cold. Lauren was sitting on the edge of her bed, still in the sweats and long-sleeved shirt, her face in her hands. She looked up when Maya entered, and Ethan could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her cheeks tracked with tears, all the careful composure from the living room completely abandoned. "Oh, sweetheart," Lauren said, her voice breaking. "You don't have to do that. I know we don't have to. We want to." Maya crossed the room and climbed up on the bed next to Lauren with the kind of fearless affection only children possessed. "You're sad and scared, and Dad says when people are sad and scared, the worst thing is being alone with it." "Maya, that's enough." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Lauren's had a very difficult night. She needs space." "Actually," Lauren said quietly, one arm coming around Maya's shoulders in a gesture that looked surprised but genuine, "space is the last thing I need." She looked at Ethan, and he saw something raw and desperate in her expression. "I've had nothing but space for years, space and privacy and carefully controlled interactions where nobody gets too close. And last night when I was standing at that railing, all I could think about was how tired I was of all that space." She took a shaky breath, and Ethan could see her fighting for words, for the ability to articulate something she'd probably never said out loud. "I don't know how to do this," she continued. "I don't know how to let people in. I don't know how to ask for help or admit weakness or any of the things that normal people do when they're struggling. I've spent so long building walls, being strong, being the person who has it all together, that I don't remember how to be anything else. So maybe you could try being something else for a little while," Ethan said, moving into the room, leaning against the doorframe. "Just for today. Just to see what it feels like." "What would that look like?" "It would look like not going to work today. Calling in sick or calling in whatever corporate people call in when they need a day. It would look like staying here, staying safe, letting yourself process what happened last night instead of shoving it down and pretending it didn't happen." Lauren shook her head. "I can't. The board meeting will happen with or without you. The company will survive one day without its CEO. You don't understand. There's a presentation I need to give, a merger I need to finalize, a dozen things that can't wait." "Can't wait? Or you won't let them wait because if you slow down, you'll have to feel things you've been running from?" The words hit harder than he'd intended, and he watched Lauren flinch as if struck. But he didn't take them back, didn't soften them, because sometimes the truth needed to be sharp to cut through the defenses people built. "That's not fair," she said. "Maybe not. But is it accurate?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her calculating, considering, trying to decide if she could trust this, trust him, trust the terrifying possibility of choosing herself over her obligations for once. "If I don't go," she said slowly, "if I call in and cancel everything, my CFO will ask questions. He'll want to know why, and if I can't give him a good reason, he'll assume something's wrong. Something is wrong. Something that can't get out. If the board knew I was struggling, if they even suspected I wasn't completely in control, they'd use it against me. There are 3 board members who've been waiting for any excuse to push me out, to replace me with someone they can manipulate. If they knew about last night, they won't know unless you tell them. People talk, hospital records, police reports. There's no hospital record because you refused medical attention. There's no police report because I didn't call them. Ethan pushed off from the doorframe, moving closer. The only people who know what happened are you, me, and Maya, and we're not telling anyone. Why? The question came out almost anguished. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? It was the same question from last night, asked from a different angle, and Ethan realized she genuinely didn't understand. She had no framework for someone helping her without wanting something in return, no experience with kindness that wasn't transactional. Because 2 years ago, he said quietly, sitting down on the other side of Maya, when my daughter was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I fell apart. Completely, utterly fell apart. I had a good job back then, benefits, stability, all of it. And I lost it because I couldn't hold it together, couldn't be professional while my child was dying. I was a mess, crying in the bathroom at work, missing deadlines, showing up late because I'd been at the hospital all night. He felt Maya lean against him, her small hand finding his, and he squeezed it gently. My boss called me into his office one day and told me I needed to get my personal life under control or find another job. Said my problems at home couldn't be allowed to affect my performance, that the company needed employees who could maintain professional standards regardless of personal circumstances. Lauren's expression had shifted to something that looked like horror. That's unconscionable. That's corporate America, Ethan said with a bitter laugh. That's the reality for most people who don't have the luxury of unlimited sick days or supportive management or the financial cushion to take time off. I lost that job, burned through my savings paying for Maya's medical care, ended up working warehouse jobs that paid half what I used to make, living in a one-bedroom apartment where we share the bed because we can't afford anything bigger. He looked at Lauren directly, making sure she was hearing him. So when you ask why I care, when you ask why I'm doing this, it's because I know what it's like to be judged for being human. I know what it's like to be punished for having feelings, for being vulnerable, for not being able to hold it together when life becomes unbearable. And I refuse to be the kind of person who looks at someone else's pain and decides it's inconvenient or inappropriate or something they should handle privately. The room was silent except for the faint sounds of the city filtering through the windows. Maya had gone very still between them, and Ethan realized she'd never heard this story before. Not all of it, not the full extent of what he'd lost and why. I'm sorry, Lauren said finally. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that I get it. I get the fear of showing weakness, the terror of letting people see you're not okay, the knowledge that vulnerability can cost you everything you've worked for. He reached across Maya to take Lauren's hand the same way he'd done last night. But I also know what happens when you try to carry everything alone. It doesn't make you strong. It just makes you isolated. And isolation is its own kind of death. Lauren's fingers tightened around his, and he watched a decision crystallize behind her eyes. Okay. Okay, I'll take today. I'll call my CFO, tell him I'm working from home, reschedule the board meeting. She trailed off, looking uncertain. I'll stay. And you'll let us stay too? At least for a few hours until we're sure you're really okay? She nodded, not quite meeting his eyes, and Ethan knew what that cost her. The admission that she needed someone, that she couldn't do this alone, that for once in her carefully controlled life she was choosing to be vulnerable. I need to make some calls, she said, and then I don't know what happens next because I've never done this before, never just stayed with how I'm feeling instead of pushing through it. Then we'll figure it out together, Ethan said. Lauren made her calls from the bedroom while Ethan and Maya waited in the living room. They could hear her voice through the door, professional, controlled, giving no indication that anything was wrong. She was good at the performance. He'd give her that. Good at being exactly who people expected her to be. When she emerged 20 minutes later, she looked exhausted but slightly less fragile. Done. I have until Monday before anyone expects to see me in person. That's 3 days. I know. She sat down on the couch across from them, her posture stiff. Now what? Now we talk, Ethan said. Really talk. About what brought you to that railing last night, about what's been going on, about what you need. I don't know what I need. Then let's start with what brought you there. To the river, Lauren was quiet for so long that Ethan thought she might refuse to answer. Then slowly, she began to speak. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you woke up one day and realized that every choice you've made, every path you've taken, was based on trying to prove something to people who don't even see you anyway? Tell me more about that. I built this company from nothing. Started in my garage 20 years ago with an idea and a loan I had no business taking. Grew it into a multi-billion-dollar corporation with offices in 15 countries. I've been on the cover of Forbes, been named one of the most powerful women in business, have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. She laughed, and it was hollow. And none of it matters. None of it fills the space where connection is supposed to be. Maya had curled up against Ethan's side, listening with the quiet attention she gave to stories, and he wrapped an arm around her while keeping his focus on Lauren. I don't have friends, Lauren continued. I have business associates, strategic partners, people who want something from me. I don't have family. My parents died in the fire that gave me these scars, and there's no one else. I don't have a partner, don't have children, don't have anyone who would notice if I just disappeared. Someone would notice, Ethan said gently. Would they? Or would they just notice that the CEO was gone and they needed to find a replacement? Would anyone miss me, Lauren the person, or would they just miss Lauren the position I fill? She stood abruptly, pacing to the windows, her arms wrapped around herself. I stood at that railing last night because I realized I've spent 20 years building a life that looks successful from the outside but feels completely empty from the inside. I've sacrificed everything, relationships, health, happiness, all of it, for a company that will replace me the second I'm gone. And I couldn't think of a single reason to keep doing it. And now? Ethan asked. After everything that's happened, can you think of a reason now? She turned to look at him, and her expression was raw with uncertainty. I don't know. You asked me last night if I would try again, and I said I didn't know. I still don't know. All I know is that when I woke up this morning and heard Maya in the other room, heard life and laughter and normalcy, I felt something I haven't felt in years. What did you feel? Curious, she said quietly. Curious about what it would be like to have that. Curious about what I've been missing. Curious enough to call in sick for the first time in 15 years and see what happens if I don't perform for once. It was something. Not hope, exactly, not yet, but the possibility of hope, which was more than she'd had last night. Can I ask you something? Maya's small voice broke the tension. About your scars? Maya, Ethan warned, but Lauren held up a hand. It's okay. What do you want to know, sweetheart? Do they hurt? Not anymore. Not physically. Anyway, they hurt a long time ago, when I was very young, but the doctors fixed them as much as they could. I have scars too, Maya said, touching the side of her head where her hair covered the surgical scars from her tumor removal. From when the doctors took the bad thing out of my brain, Dad says scars are just proof that we survived something hard. Lauren's eyes had gone bright again, and she came back to the couch, sitting down next to Maya. Your dad is very smart about a lot of things, isn't he? He is, but he's also scared sometimes, just like you. I can tell because he holds my hand really tight when the doctors talk about my scans, and sometimes he forgets to breathe. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He thought he'd been so good at hiding his fear, at being strong for her, but of course she'd noticed. Children always noticed. Being scared doesn't make you weak, Lauren said, and Ethan realized she was talking to herself as much as to Maya. Being scared just means you have something worth being afraid for. Exactly, Maya said. Dad's scared because he loves me, and you're scared because you... She trailed off, thinking, because you don't love you. Not the way you should. The observation was so accurate, so devastating in its simple truth, that Lauren actually gasped. How did you... It's okay, Maya said, patting Lauren's hand with the kind of matter-of-fact comfort only children could pull off. Dad didn't love himself for a while either, after my mom died and I got sick. He thought he had to be strong all the time, had to never be sad or scared or angry. But then Mrs. Chen told him that loving yourself means letting yourself feel all the feelings, even the hard ones, and he got better at it. Ethan made a mental note to buy Mrs. Chen the biggest bouquet he could afford. He'd had no idea she had talked to him about that. No idea Maya had been paying such close attention. "Mrs. Chen sounds very wise," Lauren said. "She is. She's from Vietnam and she makes really good soup. And she says feelings are like weather. They change all the time and you can't stop them. You can only decide what to wear." Maya looked very pleased with herself for remembering this metaphor. "So what do we wear when the feeling is this?" Lauren gestured vaguely at herself, at the room, at the mess of emotions hanging in the air. "Well, when it's raining, you need an umbrella," Maya said seriously. "And when you're sad, you need people. So I guess we're your umbrella." Lauren laughed, and this time it was real, surprised, almost joyful. "I guess you are." They spent the rest of the morning there, in that penthouse high above the city, three people who shouldn't have fit together, but somehow did. Lauren told them about the fire that had killed her parents when she was 8, about the years of surgeries and skin grafts and learning to hide the evidence of her survival. She told them about building her company as a form of armor, about using success to prove she was more than her scars, about the crushing loneliness of being admired but never truly known. Ethan told her about Sarah, his late wife, about the cancer that had taken her when Maya was 3, about the way grief had nearly destroyed him, about learning to be both mother and father to a daughter who needed more than he knew how to give, about the tumor diagnosis that had felt like the universe's cruel joke, about losing his job and his savings, and his sense of himself as someone who had his life together. And Maya, with the unself-conscious honesty of childhood, told Lauren about being scared of dying, about not remembering her mother but missing her anyway, about the kids at school who asked why she walked funny, and the teachers who talked to her like she was stupid just because her body didn't work right. It was heavy and hard and heartbreaking, all these truths laid out between them like pieces of different puzzles that somehow created a picture when combined. But it was also healing, the sharing of pain, this acknowledgement that survival left marks on everyone, that strength looked different than people imagined. By early afternoon, Maya had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by the emotional weight of the conversation. Ethan carried her to the guest room, tucking her in with the practiced efficiency of a parent who'd done this 1,000 times. When he returned to the living room, he found Lauren standing at the windows again. But her posture was different now, less defensive, more open, as if some of the weight she'd been carrying had been distributed among them. "Thank you," she said without turning around. "You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do, because what you've given me today isn't something people usually give. You've given me permission to not be okay, and you've given me company while I'm not okay. And those are gifts I didn't know I needed until I had them." Ethan joined her at the window, both of them looking out at the city sprawling below. "Can I ask you something now? Something important?" She nodded. "What are you going to do on Monday? When you go back to work, when you have to be CEO Lauren again instead of just Lauren, what changes?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't exactly show up to a board meeting and announce I'm struggling with depression and suicidal ideation. That's professional suicide, even if it's not the literal kind. So you're just going to pretend this didn't happen? Pretend you're fine? What else can I do? You can get help, real help, not just expensive therapists who help you manage your image. You can find a support system, people who see you as more than your job title. You can make changes to your life so that work isn't the only thing in it. That's easy to say when you're not responsible for thousands of employees and billions of dollars and a board of directors waiting for any sign of weakness." "You're right," Ethan acknowledged. "I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to realize that the life you're living is killing you. And I know that sometimes the hardest and bravest thing you can do is ask for help before it's too late." Lauren was quiet, and he could see her struggling with it, with the admission that she needed something she'd spent years proving she didn't need. "What if I asked you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I asked you to be part of that support system? To be someone who sees me, who knows the truth, who I can call when it gets bad?" "Then I'd say yes," Ethan said without hesitation. "On one condition." "What condition?" "That you also find a therapist who specializes in trauma and depression, someone who can help you process all of this properly, not just manage it, someone who has the training and expertise to help you build better coping mechanisms than standing on railings." She flinched at the reference, but she didn't deny it. Okay, I'll find someone. A real therapist, not a corporate image consultant disguised as mental health support. And you'll actually go to the appointments? Actually do the work? I'll try, she said. That's the best I can promise right now. Trying is enough, Ethan said. They stood there in silence, watching the city, and Ethan felt the weight of what they were building. Not a romance, not exactly, not yet, but a connection born of crisis and honesty and the shared understanding that survival sometimes meant accepting help from unexpected places. His phone buzzed, a reminder about his shift that started in 2 hours. Reality, pressing back in with its demands and responsibilities, and the practical concerns of keeping a life running. I need to go soon, he said reluctantly. Work. On a Friday afternoon? Warehouse shifts don't care about convenient timing, but I'll check on you tomorrow, if that's okay. Make sure you're doing okay, that you're not standing on any railings? Her voice carried a trace of dark humor. I promise I'll stay away from rivers and heights and anything else that could be considered concerning behavior. Lauren, I'm serious, she said, turning to face him fully. I'm not going to try again. Not tonight, not this weekend, probably not ever. Because as terrifying as it is to choose to stay, to choose to feel all of this, I think I'm more scared of what I'd miss if I left. What would you miss? She smiled, and it was small but genuine. Finding out what happens next. Finding out if this feeling, this curiosity, this possibility turns into something worth staying for. Ethan's phone buzzed again, more insistent this time, and he knew he was running out of time. I really do have to go, but I meant what I said. I'll check on you tomorrow. And I'll answer, Lauren said. That's a promise. He went to wake Maya, gathering their things, preparing to return to the regular world after this strange interlude in a penthouse above the city. But as he was leaving, Lauren caught his arm. Ethan, that question I asked you last night, about whether you'd stay if you really saw me. Yeah? Ask me the same question. Ask me if I'd stay if I really saw myself. He understood what she was asking, for accountability, for someone to check whether her promise was real, whether this moment of choosing life over death would hold when the darkness came back. Will you stay? He asked. If you really see yourself, all the broken pieces and the scars and the fear and the loneliness, will you stay anyway? Lauren took a breath, and he watched her choose the answer, watched her commit to it. Yes, I'll stay. It wasn't a guarantee, it wasn't a cure, but it was a choice, made consciously in a moment of clarity, and Ethan knew from experience that sometimes those conscious choices were the only thing that kept you tethered when everything else tried to pull you under. He and Maya took the elevator down, stepping out into a lobby that seemed impossibly normal after everything that had happened upstairs. The doorman called them a car with professional efficiency, never asking questions, never indicating that there was anything unusual about a man and a little girl leaving the penthouse mid-afternoon. In the car, Maya leaned against him, her voice drowsy. Is Lauren going to be okay, Dad? I think so, honey. I hope so. We're going to help her, right? We're going to be her family of choice? Yeah, sweetheart, we're going to help her. Good, Maya said, already drifting toward sleep. She needs us. Ethan looked out the window at the city passing by, thinking about the woman they'd left behind in that penthouse, about the promise she'd made, about the fragile beginning of something that might become hope if they nurtured it carefully enough. His phone buzzed one more time and he pulled it out, expecting another work reminder. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. Thank you for today, for all of it, for seeing me and staying anyway. L. He typed back quickly. Thank you for letting us. Check in with me tomorrow. The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow. I promise. Ethan pocketed his phone and held his daughter close, feeling the weight and wonder of what they'd stumbled into, of the rescue that had turned into something more complicated and more beautiful than he'd imagined when he jumped into that river. The question was whether Lauren could rescue herself with their help, whether she could build a life worth living instead of a life worth escaping. He didn't know the answer yet, but he knew they'd find out together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, One moment of staying when leaving would be easier. And for now, that was enough. The call came at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the river. Ethan jerked awake to his phone vibrating on the nightstand, his heart already racing with the parents' instinctive terror that middle-of-the-night calls brought. He grabbed it, ready for news about Maya's scans or a medical emergency or any of the 100 nightmares that lived in the space between sleeping and waking. Lauren's name on the screen made him pause for just a moment before he answered. "Hello? I'm sorry." Her voice was tight, strained, barely holding together. "I'm so sorry. I know it's late. I shouldn't have called. Lauren, what's wrong? Are you okay?" No, I'm not okay, and I don't know what to do. And you said I could call if it got bad. But maybe you didn't mean the middle of the night. Maybe... Lauren, breathe. I meant any time, including the middle of the night. Tell me what's happening." He could hear her trying to control her breathing, trying to pull herself together enough to speak coherently. Next to him, Maya stirred but didn't wake, and he slipped carefully out of bed, padding to the living room so he wouldn't disturb her. "It's the dreams," Lauren said finally. "I keep having these dreams about the fire, about my parents, about burning, and I wake up and I can't breathe and I can't remember where I am and I can't do this anymore. I can't keep reliving it every time I close my eyes." "Have you talked to your therapist about the nightmares?" "Yes. She says it's normal, that processing trauma means it gets worse before it gets better, that my brain is finally letting me feel things I've been suppressing for 20 years. But knowing it's normal doesn't make it feel any less like I'm drowning." Ethan sank onto the couch, cradling the phone against his ear. They'd talked every day since that Friday, sometimes just brief texts to check in, sometimes longer conversations about her therapy sessions or his work or Maya's latest adventures at school. She'd found a trauma specialist like she'd promised, had started doing the real work of confronting everything she'd been running from. And he'd learned that healing wasn't linear, wasn't pretty, wasn't the smooth upward trajectory people imagined. "Tell me about the dream," he said quietly. "Sometimes talking about it helps take away its power." "I don't want to burden you with... Lauren, tell me about the dream." She was quiet for a moment, and he could hear the sounds of the city through her phone, the ambient noise of a penthouse that never quite achieved silence. Then she started talking, her voice low and raw with pain. "I'm 8 years old again, and I can hear my mother screaming. The house is on fire and I can't find my way out because there's smoke everywhere and the heat is so intense it feels like my skin is melting. I'm calling for my father, but he doesn't answer. And I know, even in the dream, I know that he's already gone, that they're both already gone, and I'm alone." Her breath hitched, and Ethan heard her fighting tears. "And then I'm standing at the river again, at that railing, and I'm 8 years old, but I'm also me now, and I'm thinking that jumping would be easier than feeling this, that the cold water would be a relief compared to the burning. And I step off the edge, and I'm falling, and right before I hit the water, I wake up. Every night? Every night for the past week, sometimes multiple times a night. I'm terrified to sleep, Ethan. I'm exhausted, but I'm more terrified of the dreams than I am of staying awake, so I just don't sleep." He could hear it in her voice now, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting their own mind for too long. "Have you tried the techniques your therapist suggested? The grounding exercises?" "They don't work when I'm asleep. They don't stop the dreams from coming." "No, but they might help when you wake up. Help you come back to reality faster. Remember where you are. Remind yourself that you're safe." "I don't feel safe." The admission came out small, almost childlike. "I don't feel safe in my own mind." Ethan understood that feeling more intimately than he wanted to admit. He'd spent months after Sarah's death feeling like his own thoughts were ambushing him, like his brain had become enemy territory he had to navigate with extreme caution. "Okay," he said, "here's what we're going to do. I'm going to stay on the phone with you. You're going to lie down, and I'm going to talk to you until you fall asleep. And if you have another nightmare, I'll still be here when you wake up." "You can't stay up all night talking to me." "Actually, I can. I work the late shift tomorrow. Don't have to be in until 3, so I've got time." "Ethan, Lauren, you called me because you needed someone. Let me be someone for you. Let me help." He heard her breath catch, heard the moment she stopped fighting and just accepted the help being offered. Okay, thank you. Go lie down. Get comfortable. He waited while she moved, heard the rustle of sheets, the small sounds of someone settling in for sleep. When she spoke again, her voice was muffled, as if she'd pulled the covers up around herself. I'm scared. I know, but I'm right here. You're not alone. What should we talk about? Ethan thought for a moment, considering what might pull her mind away from the trauma, what might give her something peaceful to focus on. Tell me about the best day you remember. Before the fire. Before all of it. What's the happiest memory you have? Lauren was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then slowly, she started to speak. I was 7. My parents took me to the beach. We lived inland, so the ocean was this huge exotic thing. My dad taught me to body surf, and my mom built sandcastles with me, and we stayed until sunset. I remember the sky was this incredible pink and orange, and my dad put me on his shoulders so I could see better, and my mom took a picture of us. Her voice had softened, losing some of its sharp edges of fear. I remember feeling completely safe, completely loved, like nothing bad could ever happen because my parents were there and they would protect me from everything. I remember thinking that this was what happiness felt like, and I wanted to bottle it up and keep it forever. That's a beautiful memory, Ethan said gently. It is. And then 6 months later they were dead, and I learned that happiness doesn't last, that safety is an illusion, that the people you love can be taken away in an instant, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Is that why you don't let people close? Because you're afraid of losing them? Partially. Also because I learned that being alone means never having to survive that kind of loss again. If you don't love anyone, if you don't let anyone love you, then you can't be destroyed when they leave. But you can be destroyed by loneliness instead, Ethan pointed out. You can be destroyed by isolation. That's what was happening when you stood at that railing. You were being destroyed by the very thing you thought would protect you. I know. My therapist says the same thing. Says I built walls to survive childhood trauma, but now those same walls are suffocating me. Says I need to learn that intimacy doesn't equal danger, that vulnerability doesn't equal weakness, that letting people see me won't necessarily end in abandonment. Do you believe her? I want to. When I'm in her office, when I'm talking it through logically, I can see the pattern, can understand intellectually that I'm repeating cycles that don't serve me anymore. But then I'm alone at 3 in the morning, having nightmares about everyone I've ever loved dying, and the fear feels more real than any therapy insight. Ethan shifted on the couch, pulling a blanket over himself against the apartment's night chill. Can I tell you something Maya said the other day? She asked me why some people have happy families and some people have sad ones. And I told her that most families have both, happiness and sadness, joy and pain, all mixed together. That the difference isn't whether bad things happen because bad things happen to everyone. The difference is whether you have people to help you carry the bad things when they do. Your daughter is very wise for 7. She's had to grow up fast, too fast. But she's also shown me that resilience doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means feeling the pain and finding reasons to keep going anyway. What are your reasons? Lauren asked. When it gets bad, when you're scared about her health or overwhelmed by everything, what keeps you going? Her, mostly. The knowledge that she needs me, that I'm all she has, that giving up isn't an option because she's counting on me. But also, he paused, trying to articulate something he'd never quite put into words before. Also the small moments, the way she laughs at terrible jokes, the fierce concentration on her face when she's working on a puzzle, the questions she asks about the world that remind me there's still wonder in it, still things worth paying attention to. I don't have those things, Lauren said quietly. I don't have anyone who needs me in that way. I don't have small moments of wonder. I just have work and responsibility and the grinding sameness of days that blur together. Then maybe we need to find you some small moments, some things worth paying attention to beyond board meetings and profit margins. Like what? Like anything. Anything that makes you feel alive in a good way instead of the awful way. What did you used to enjoy before you built your empire and forgot to build a life? She thought about it, and he could hear her turning the question over, examining it from different angles. I used to paint. Nothing professional, just watercolors for fun. I'd spend hours mixing colors, trying to capture light on water, or the way clouds moved across the sky. It was meditative, peaceful, made me feel connected to something beyond myself. When's the last time you painted? 15 years ago? Maybe longer. I stopped when the company started really taking off. Told myself I didn't have time for hobbies, that I needed to focus on building something that mattered. And what if painting mattered too? What if making space for things that bring you peace is just as important as making space for things that bring you profit? That sounds nice in theory, but in practice, you stood at a river's edge 3 weeks ago because your life had become unbearable. So maybe the theory deserves a chance. He heard her breath catch, heard the truth land the way truth often did, with a sharp recognition that cut through defenses. You don't pull punches, do you? She said. Not when it matters. Not when I think someone needs to hear something true, even if it's uncomfortable. My therapist says the same thing, that I surround myself with people who tell me what I want to hear instead of what I need to hear, that I've built my entire professional life around being protected from discomfort. Then maybe it's good that you have me and your therapist both refusing to protect you from the uncomfortable truths. Maybe? Her voice was getting drowsy now, the exhaustion finally overtaking the fear. Ethan, thank you for staying on the phone, for not making me feel like I was burdening you. You're not a burden, Lauren. You're a person who's struggling, and people who struggle deserve support, not judgment. That's a nice idea. It's not just an idea, it's how it should be, how it will be if you let people help you. He heard her breathing start to even out, start to slow into the rhythms of sleep. He kept talking anyway, his voice low and steady, telling her about Maya's physical therapy session that week, about the new kid in her class who'd asked why she walked funny, and how Maya had explained with such matter-of-fact grace that the other kid had just nodded and asked if she wanted to play at recess anyway. He told her about Mrs. Chen's latest soup delivery, about the book he was reading, about the small, unremarkable details of a life that was sometimes hard, but also sometimes beautiful in its ordinariness. He talked until he was certain she was deeply asleep, until her breathing was steady and even and peaceful. Then he stayed on the line anyway, keeping his promise, making sure she wasn't alone even in unconsciousness. An hour passed. 2. He dozed on the couch with the phone still pressed to his ear, jerking awake every time he heard her stir, every time her breathing changed rhythm. But the nightmares didn't come, or if they did, they didn't wake her, and eventually the sky outside his window started to lighten with the approach of dawn. Ethan? Her voice was sleepy, confused. Are you still there? I'm still here. What time is it? Almost 6. How are you feeling? I slept. I actually slept. Wonder crept into her voice. No nightmares. Or if I had them, I don't remember them. That's good. That's really good. You stayed on the phone all night. I told you I would. He heard her moving, imagined her sitting up in that enormous bed in the penthouse, looking out at the city, waking up below her. I don't know how to thank you for that. You don't have to thank me. Just promise me something. What? Promise me that the next time it gets bad, the next time the nightmares are overwhelming or the fear is too much, you'll call someone. Me, your therapist, a crisis line, anyone. Promise me you won't sit alone with it until it becomes unbearable. I promise. And promise me you'll think about the painting, about finding something in your life that's just for you, just for joy, not for productivity or profit or proving anything to anyone. That's a harder promise to make. I know, but make it anyway. She was quiet for a moment, and he could almost see her considering it, weighing the commitment against her fear of failure, against the vulnerability of wanting something just because it brought her happiness. Okay, I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now, that I'll think about it. Thinking about it is enough. They talked for a few more minutes, easing out of the intimacy of the long night into the more normal rhythms of morning conversation. Then Maya's alarm went off, signaling the start of their day, and Ethan had to go be a father, had to make breakfast and pack lunch, and get his daughter ready for school. Go take care of your girl, Lauren said. And Ethan? Thank you for everything, for staying. Always, he said, and meant it. The days that followed settled into a new pattern. Lauren would text in the morning to let him know how she'd slept, what she was facing in her day. He'd text back with updates about Maya, about work, about the small details of his life that seemed to anchor her somehow, remind her that there was a world beyond corporate boardrooms and profit margins. They talked on the phone most evenings after Maya was asleep, long conversations that ranged from the profound to the mundane. Lauren told him about her therapy sessions, about the painful work of unpacking trauma, about the slow process of learning to be vulnerable without feeling like it would destroy her. He told her about the challenges of single parenthood, about the constant worry that he wasn't enough, that Maya deserved more than a father who worked warehouse shifts and could barely afford their apartment. "You're enough," Lauren said one night, her voice fierce. "You're more than enough. Do you know what I see when you talk about Maya? I see someone who shows up every day, who fights for her, who loves her so completely that it reshapes his entire life around her needs. That's not failing. That's succeeding at the only thing that really matters. Tell that to the bill collectors. I'm serious. Money doesn't make you a good parent. Presence makes you a good parent. And you're so present for her, so completely devoted to her well-being, that it makes me ache with envy sometimes." Envy? For what you have, for that uncomplicated love, that sense of purpose, that knowledge that you matter to someone in a fundamental way. I'd trade all my success for one day of feeling that necessary to another person. Her words haunted him, stayed with him as he went about his days, as he watched Maya struggle through physical therapy, or helped her with homework, or tucked her in at night. He'd never thought of his life as enviable, had spent so much time focused on what he'd lost, what he couldn't provide, what was missing, that he'd failed to see what was right in front of him, the love that was uncomplicated, the purpose that was clear. The way Maya looked at him like he hung the moon, even on days when he felt like he was barely holding it together. 3 weeks after the middle-of-the-night phone call Lauren called during his lunch break, her voice strange in a way he couldn't quite identify. "I did something," she said without preamble. "Okay, what did you do?" "I bought paint supplies. Watercolors, paper, brushes, the whole setup. They're being delivered to my apartment today." Ethan felt a smile spread across his face. "Lauren, that's amazing." "Is it? Or is it stupid? I haven't painted in 15 years. I probably won't even remember how. I'll probably just waste money on supplies that sit in a closet gathering dust while I twit. Stop. Stop talking yourself out of something before you've even tried it. But what if I'm terrible at it now? What if I've lost whatever ability I had? Then you'll be terrible at it, and that will be okay because the point isn't to be good. The point is to do something that brings you joy." She laughed, but it was shaky. "I don't remember what joy feels like. What if I can't access it anymore? What if I've been numb for so long that I don't know how to feel good things?" "Then you'll practice. You'll paint badly and feel frustrated and keep doing it anyway until some small part of you remembers what it's like to create something just because you want to. You'll be patient with yourself the way you'd be patient with anyone else learning something new." "I'm not good at being patient with myself." "I know, but that's part of the work too. Learning that you deserve the same kindness you'd extend to others." He heard her take a shaky breath, heard her fighting emotions he couldn't see. "What if I fail?" "At painting? Lauren, there's no failing at a hobby. There's only doing it or not doing it, and right now you're choosing to do it, and that's brave." "It doesn't feel brave, it feels terrifying." "Most brave things do." That evening, she sent him a photo. It was a simple watercolor study, just abstract washes of color, blues bleeding into greens, bleeding into purples, no recognizable shapes or forms, just color and light and the way paint moved across wet paper. It was messy and imperfect and beautiful. "First painting in 15 years, her text read. "I cried the whole time I was making it." "Good tears or bad tears?" he typed back. "I don't know, both maybe. Grief for all the years I didn't do this, relief that I still can, fear that I'll stop again, hope that I won't." That sounds like exactly the right kind of complicated. My therapist says I need to sit with complicated feelings instead of trying to resolve them immediately. Says I need to learn that ambiguity isn't the same as danger. Your therapist is smart. She is. She also says I should invite you and Maya over for dinner sometime. Says I need to practice having people in my space, letting people see my life instead of keeping everyone at a careful distance. Ethan's heart did something complicated in his chest, something that felt like hope and fear tangled together. They'd been talking for weeks now, had built this strange intimacy of phone calls and texts and late-night conversations, but they hadn't actually seen each other since that first weekend. Hadn't been in the same room, hadn't looked at each other across a table, hadn't navigated the difference between connection through a phone and connection face-to-face. "We'd like that," he typed carefully. "When were you thinking?" "This weekend, Saturday evening. I could order food, keep it casual, no pressure." No pressure except for the pressure of actually following through on practicing vulnerability? Exactly that pressure, which is terrifying but apparently necessary for growth. They settled on Saturday at 6, and Ethan spent the rest of the week trying not to overthink it, trying not to analyze what it meant that Lauren was ready for this step, what it meant that he was looking forward to it with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to a simple dinner. Maya, of course, was thrilled. "We're going to see Miss Lauren. Can I bring her a picture I drew? Can I show her my new puzzle? Can I—" "Yes to the picture. We'll see about the puzzle. And let's remember that this is probably hard for her, so we should be gentle, okay?" "I'm always gentle." She was too. Maya had a gift for meeting people exactly where they were, for offering affection without demanding anything in return, for loving with the uncomplicated wholeness that only children seem to manage. Saturday came, and Ethan found himself nervous in a way that felt absurd. This was Lauren. They'd talked every day for weeks. There was no reason for his hands to shake slightly as he knocked on the penthouse door, no reason for his heart to race when he heard her footsteps approaching. But when she opened the door, he understood the nervousness. Because phone calls were one thing, but seeing her in person was something else entirely. She looked different than she had that first night. Healthier, less haunted, though there was still a fragility around her eyes that spoke of ongoing struggle. She was wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her feet bare, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked simultaneously terrified and determined. "Hi," she said, and her smile was tentative but real. "Hi," Ethan said back. Maya had no such hesitation. She launched herself at Lauren with a hug that would have knocked over someone less prepared, chattering about her week and the picture she'd brought, and could she please see if Lauren had painted anything new? Lauren looked at Ethan over Maya's head, her expression caught between panic and delight, and he just smiled and shrugged, mouthing, "Sorry," even though he wasn't. Not really. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Lauren had ordered an absurd amount of food from what she explained was her favorite Italian restaurant, and they ate at the dining table overlooking the city, Maya regaling them with stories from school, while Ethan and Lauren traded glances that spoke of shared understanding, shared amusement, shared affection for this fierce little girl who'd somehow decided they were all family now. After dinner, Maya discovered Lauren's painting supplies and immediately demanded a lesson. Lauren looked genuinely terrified at the prospect, but she set up paper and paints anyway, showing Maya how to wet the paper, how to let colors bleed together, how to trust the process instead of trying to control every outcome. Ethan watched them from the couch, watched Lauren's careful instruction, watched Maya's fearless experimentation, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what Lauren had been missing, these simple moments of connection, of sharing something she loved with someone who received it with pure enthusiasm. This was what made life worth living, these small exchanges of knowledge and joy and presence. "Dad, look!" Maya held up her paper, which was covered in wild swirls of color that might have been anything or nothing. "I made a storm." "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Miss Lauren says sometimes the best paintings are the ones where you don't know what they're going to be until they're finished. She says that's called trusting the process. Miss Lauren is very wise." Lauren caught his eye and blushed slightly, turning back to help Maya with her next attempt. They painted until Maya started yawning, until the sky outside had gone fully dark and the city lights below created a galaxy of artificial stars. "Time for bed, kiddo," Ethan said, gathering her up despite her protests. "But I want to paint more." "We can paint more another time. Say thank you to Lauren." Maya twisted in his arms to look at Lauren, her expression suddenly serious. "Thank you for teaching me painting and for letting us come over and for being our friend. You're one of my favorite people now." Lauren's eyes went bright with tears, and she blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure. "You're one of my favorite people too, sweetheart." Ethan carried Maya to the guest room, helping her into pajamas he'd thought to pack, tucking her into the same bed she'd slept in that first night. She was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, exhausted by excitement and paint, and the simple joy of an evening well spent. When he returned to the living room, he found Lauren standing at the windows again, her arms wrapped around herself, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "That was harder than I expected," she said quietly. "Bad hard or good hard?" "Good hard. Terrifying hard. The kind of hard that makes me want to run, but also makes me want to stay and see what happens if I don't run." Ethan joined her at the window, both of them looking out at the city. "You did really well tonight, with Maya, with the painting, with all of it. I almost canceled 3 times today. Kept finding reasons why having you over was a terrible idea, why I should postpone, why I wasn't ready. But then I remembered what you said about brave things being terrifying, and I decided to be terrified and do it anyway." "I'm glad you did." They stood in silence for a moment, and Ethan was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how easy it would be to reach out and take her hand, how much he wanted to close the small distance between them. "Can I ask you something?" Lauren said, not looking at him, her eyes fixed on the city below. "And I need you to be completely honest, even if the truth is uncomfortable." "Okay." "Why are you doing this? Not just tonight, but all of it. The phone calls and the support and the patience with my mess. What are you getting out of this?" It was a fair question, one he'd been asking himself in quieter moments, when he couldn't quite explain why he was so invested in this woman's healing, why her pain felt somehow personal to him. "Honestly," he said, "at first it was just about making sure you were okay, making sure my jumping into that river wasn't for nothing, but somewhere along the way, it became about more than that." "What more?" "You," he said simply. "Getting to know you, not just the polished CEO exterior, but the real person underneath, the one who's scared and brave and broken and beautiful all at once. The one who cries while painting and calls at 2 in the morning when the nightmares get bad and asks questions about whether she matters to anyone." He turned to face her fully, and she slowly turned to meet his gaze. "You asked me weeks ago if I would stay if I really saw you, and the answer is yes, because I'm seeing you, all the complicated, messy, imperfect parts, and I'm still here, still choosing to be here, still wanting to be here." Lauren was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face in the dimmed apartment lighting. "I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to believe it's real." "Then don't believe it yet. Just let it be possible. Let yourself consider that maybe, just maybe, you're worthy of being seen and staying for, exactly as you are." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "My therapist would be so proud of this conversation. She's been trying to get me to internalize this exact message for weeks." "Maybe it's easier to hear from someone who's not paid to say it." "Maybe." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "Ethan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it." "I'm listening." "I'm not ready for this to be a romance. I know how this looks. You saved my life, we've been talking constantly. There's clearly something happening between us, but I'm barely keeping my head above water with just basic functioning. I can't handle the weight of someone else's expectations or desires or needs right now. I need this to be friendship, just friendship, at least for now." The word should have stung, should have felt like rejection, but instead they felt like honesty, like trust, like Lauren giving him exactly what she'd promised, the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. "Okay," he said simply. She blinked, surprised. "Okay? That's it? What else would I say? You're telling me what you need, and what you need is friendship. I can do friendship. I am doing friendship. Everything we've been doing for weeks, that's friendship. Nothing has to change. But what if you want more? Then I'll deal with that. That's my work to do, not yours. You don't owe me anything beyond what you're already giving. Your honesty, your trust, your willingness to keep showing up and doing the hard work of healing." She stared at him, and he could see her struggling to understand, to accept that someone could want her company without demanding access to all of her, that care didn't have to come with conditions. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me for respecting your boundaries. That's just basic human decency. You'd be surprised how rare it is." That made him sad in ways he couldn't quite articulate, but he just nodded, accepting the truth of her experience, not trying to argue her out of what she knew. His phone buzzed with an alarm, a reminder that they had early morning plans tomorrow, that he needed to get Maya home and into her own bed. I should go. Let you get some rest. Will you still call me? Tomorrow and the day after that? Every day if you want. I want. She walked him to the door, keeping a careful distance, respecting her own boundaries even as she struggled with them. Ethan, I'm really glad you jumped into that river. Me too. He gathered a sleepy Maya and their things, heading for the elevator, and just before the doors closed, he looked back to see Lauren still standing in the doorway, watching them leave. She looked small and scared and brave all at once, and he thought about what she'd said about joy, about not knowing if she could still access it, about being numb for so long. But he'd seen her face when she was teaching Maya to paint, had heard her laugh when Maya declared her storm painting a masterpiece, had watched her eyes light up with something that looked a lot like happiness. Maybe she was starting to remember. Maybe joy was like any muscle. It atrophied from disuse but could be strengthened with practice. Maybe all she needed was time and patience and people who would stay while she figured out how to feel good things again. He was willing to be one of those people. For as long as she needed, in whatever capacity she needed, he was willing to stay and help her remember what it meant to be human, to be connected, to be more than just a brilliant mind in an expensive suit running from ghosts that followed her everywhere. The elevator descended, carrying them back to the ordinary world, but Ethan carried something new with him, the knowledge that healing happened in small increments, in paintings, in phone calls, in dinners shared, in friendships that asked nothing and offered everything. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning in late November, 6 weeks after that dinner at Lauren's penthouse. Ethan was eating cereal standing up in the kitchen, running late for Maya's school drop-off, when his phone buzzed with a notification. Lauren's name appeared on the screen, but instead of their usual morning text, it was a forwarded email with a single line, "This is what I was afraid of." He opened the attachment and felt his stomach drop as he read. It was from someone named Richard Castellan, sent to Lauren's entire board of directors. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding CEO fitness for leadership." The body of the email was worse. Much worse. Dear board members, it has come to my attention through reliable sources that Ms. Hale has been experiencing significant personal difficulties that may be affecting her judgment and capacity to lead the company effectively. While I have enormous respect for Ms. Hale's past contributions, I believe we have a fiduciary duty to address concerns about her current mental state and whether she remains the right person to guide us through our upcoming expansion. I propose we convene an emergency meeting to discuss these matters and potentially explore leadership alternatives. Ethan read it twice, his cereal forgotten, his mind racing through the implications. This was an assassination attempt, corporate style. Someone had found out about Lauren's struggles and was weaponizing her vulnerability to push her out. His phone rang immediately. Lauren's name on the screen. "I saw the email," he said before she could speak. "Someone told them." Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Someone found out about the therapy, about the medication my doctor prescribed, about all of it, and they told Richard, and now he's using it to destroy me." "Who knew, besides your therapist? Just my doctor, the pharmacy, and—" She stopped abruptly. "My assistant, Sarah. She processes my expenses, including therapy appointments and prescription copays. She must have seen something and talked." "Can you prove it was her?" "Does it matter? The damage is done. Richard has enough to make his case, and half the board has been looking for any excuse to replace me with someone more malleable. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why people like me don't ask for help, don't admit weakness, don't—" "Lauren, breathe. We're going to figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out. It's over. My career, my company, everything I've built. It's over because I made the mistake of trying to get better instead of just suffering in silence like I should have." The bitterness in her voice was corrosive, dangerous. Ethan could hear her spiraling, could hear the old thought patterns reasserting themselves, telling her that vulnerability was fatal, that she should have stayed behind her walls where it was safe. "When's the board meeting?" he asked. "Friday. 2 days." He scheduled it for Friday afternoon so I'd have minimal time to prepare a defense. Then we have 2 days to prepare. 2 days to figure out how you want to handle this. How I want to handle this? Ethan, there's no handling this. They're going to ask me about my mental health in front of the entire board. They're going to question my fitness to lead. They're going to make me choose between lying about my struggles or admitting the truth and watching them use it to destroy me. Or, Ethan said carefully, you could do something they're not expecting. Like what? Like refusing to be ashamed, like owning your truth instead of letting them weaponize it. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's a beautiful idea that would result in my immediate termination. Boards don't reward vulnerability, Ethan. They punish it. Some boards do, but you built this company. You own 42% of it. You told me that weeks ago. Richard and his allies need a majority vote to remove you, which means they need to convince at least 3 other board members that you're unfit. Are there 3 board members who would actually vote against you if you gave them a reason not to? I don't know. Maybe. There's Elizabeth Chen, she's been supportive, and Marcus Wright has always been fair. But I don't know if fair is enough when Richard is painting me as mentally unstable. Then give them a different narrative, give them the truth, but frame it yourself instead of letting Richard frame it for you. He could hear her breathing, could hear her fighting against every instinct that told her to hide, to deflect, to protect herself through secrecy. I need to think, she said finally. I need to talk to my therapist, figure out what I'm even legally allowed to say. Call her now, and call me back after. I'm serious, Lauren. You have options here. Don't let Richard convince you that you're powerless. She hung up without saying goodbye, and Ethan stood in his kitchen holding his phone, cereal bowl abandoned, already late for Maya's drop-off but unable to move. This was the crisis they'd both known was coming, the moment when Lauren's 2 worlds collided, when the private work of healing crashed into the public demands of leadership. He dropped Maya at school with a distracted kiss and promises to pick her up on time, then called in sick to work for the first time in 18 months. His supervisor wasn't happy, but Ethan barely registered the man's irritation. He had more important things to worry about. Lauren called back 2 hours later. My therapist says I'm not legally required to disclose anything about my medical history or mental health treatment. She says this is actually potentially illegal, that Richard could be violating disability discrimination laws by using my mental health against me. That's good. You could threaten legal action. I could, but that makes me look defensive, makes it look like I have something to hide. And it turns this into a public battle that could damage the company's reputation and stock price, which actually would be grounds for the board to question my judgment. So what do you want to do? Silence stretched long enough that Ethan thought the call might have dropped. Then Lauren spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I want to tell them the truth. Not because Richard is forcing me to, but because I'm choosing to. I want to stand in front of that board and explain exactly what I've been going through and why it makes me a better leader, not a worse one. Are you sure? No, I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of going back to hiding, of proving to myself that vulnerability really is dangerous, that the walls I built were justified. If I let Richard win without fighting, I'm admitting that everything my therapist has been teaching me is wrong. I'm admitting that people like me can't afford to be human. Pride surged through Ethan's chest. Then let's prepare. Let's make sure that when you walk into that boardroom, you're so clear on what you want to say that nothing Richard throws at you can knock you off course. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Lauren wrote and rewrote her statement, practicing it over the phone with Ethan, refining the language until it struck the balance between honesty and professionalism. She consulted with her lawyer, who confirmed that she was within her rights to disclose or not disclose as she chose, but that if she did disclose, she should focus on facts rather than feelings, on outcomes rather than diagnoses. Thursday evening, Ethan and Maya showed up at her penthouse with dinner and moral support. Maya had made Lauren a card that read, "You're brave and strong and my friend," in crayon, with a picture of what might have been a person or possibly a very abstract flower. "For good luck tomorrow," Maya said, presenting it with the seriousness of someone bestowing a great honor. Lauren's eyes filled with tears as she accepted it. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll keep it with me." They ate Thai food on the floor of the living room because Maya insisted it was more fun that way, and Lauren seemed grateful for the absurdity, for the way a 7-year-old's logic could cut through the weight of corporate warfare. After dinner, Maya fell asleep on the couch watching a movie, and Ethan and Lauren sat at the dining table, her statement spread out between them. "Read it to me one more time," Ethan said, "like you're actually in the boardroom." Lauren took a breath, squared her shoulders, and began. "Thank you for taking the time to meet today. I know Richard has raised concerns about my fitness to lead, and rather than address these concerns through lawyers or carefully worded denials, I've decided to speak to you directly about what's been happening in my life." Her voice was steady, professional, but Ethan could see her hands shaking slightly where they rested on the table. 3 months ago, I was struggling with severe depression and suicidal ideation. I'd been struggling for years, actually, but I'd become very good at hiding it, at maintaining the appearance of someone who had everything under control. Then one night, the weight of that pretense became too much, and I made a choice that could have ended very badly if not for the intervention of someone who refused to look away. She glanced at Ethan, and he nodded encouragement. Since that night, I've been in intensive therapy working to address decades of unprocessed trauma and unhealthy coping mechanisms. I've been prescribed medication to help manage my symptoms while I do the deeper work of healing. And I've been learning what it means to be a whole person instead of just a successful executive, to have a life instead of just a career. Lauren's voice grew stronger as she continued. "I'm telling you this not because Richard has forced my hand, but because I believe leadership requires authenticity. I believe that the same qualities that make me vulnerable, my willingness to acknowledge when I'm struggling, my commitment to seeking help instead of suffering alone, my recognition that mental health is as important as physical health, also make me a better leader." She looked down at the paper, then back up, abandoning the script. "The truth is, I've been running this company for 20 years with untreated depression and trauma. I've been making decisions while actively suicidal, while so numb I couldn't feel anything, while so disconnected from my own humanity that I saw people as resources rather than individuals. And yes, I grew the company. Yes, I increased shareholder value. Yes, I achieved every metric of success we traditionally measure. But I also created a culture where people were afraid to show weakness, where vulnerability was punished, where the only thing that mattered was performance regardless of personal cost. I created that culture because it was the only culture I knew how to create, because I was replicating my own internal dysfunction on an organizational scale." Ethan watched her find her passion, watched her transform fear into conviction. "The work I've been doing these past 3 months hasn't made me weaker. It's made me more aware, more empathetic, more capable of seeing the full humanity of the people who work for this company. It's taught me that sustainable success requires sustainable people, and that means creating an environment where mental health isn't a liability, where asking for help isn't career suicide, where being human is not only acceptable, but encouraged." She paused, taking a breath. "So when Richard suggests that my treatment for depression makes me unfit to lead, what I hear is a fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership requires. Leadership isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being honest about your vulnerabilities and showing people that they can be honest about theirs. It's about creating organizations where people can bring their whole selves to work instead of leaving their humanity at the door. If this board believes that seeking mental health treatment is disqualifying, then you should absolutely vote to remove me. But if you believe that authenticity, self-awareness, and a commitment to health, both personal and organizational, are valuable qualities in a leader, then I ask you to recognize that the work I've been doing makes me more qualified, not less, to lead this company into the future." She finished and looked at Ethan with exhausted eyes. "Too much?" "It's perfect," he said quietly. "It's honest and powerful and exactly what they need to hear." "What if they fire me anyway?" "Then you'll have told your truth and refused to be ashamed of it, and that's worth something regardless of the outcome." "Is it?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Is it worth losing everything I've built?" Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "The question isn't whether it's worth losing everything. The question is whether everything you've built is worth keeping if you have to become someone you're not in order to keep it." She looked at him for a long moment, her gray eyes searching his face for something he hoped she found there. "When did you get so wise?" "When I had a daughter who needed me to figure out what actually matters. Turns out most of what we think matters really doesn't." And most of what actually matters, we spend too much time ignoring. What matters, in your expert opinion? Being seen, being known, being loved for who you actually are instead of who you pretend to be. Having people who show up when things are hard. Having reasons to get up in the morning beyond just obligation or fear. He squeezed her hand gently. You matter, Lauren. Not your position, not your wealth, not your success. You. The person who paints watercolors and calls at 2 a.m. and is learning what it means to be vulnerable. That person matters. Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. I'm so scared. I know. But you're going to do it anyway because that's what brave people do. They feel the fear and do the hard thing despite it. She nodded, pulling herself together with visible effort. Will you be there tomorrow? Outside the building, I mean. I know you can't be in the boardroom, but could you be nearby? Just knowing you're close would help. Of course. Maya has school until 3, but I'll come after I pick her up. We'll be in the lobby when you come out, no matter what happens. Thank you. She withdrew her hand, wiping at her face with her sleeve. I should let you get Maya home. She has school tomorrow. They gathered their things quietly, and Ethan carried his sleeping daughter to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, Lauren spoke. Ethan, if this goes badly tomorrow, if they vote to remove me, I need you to know that I don't regret any of it. Not the therapy, not the vulnerability, not letting you in. Even if it costs me everything, I don't regret finally trying to be a real person instead of just a corporate automaton. It's not going to cost you everything, he said, but the doors were already closing, carrying them down and away. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp November clarity that felt inappropriately cheerful. Ethan dropped Maya at school, worked a half shift he'd begged his supervisor for, and picked her up at 3 with promises of a special afternoon. They took the subway downtown to Lauren's building, arriving at 4:30, 30 minutes before the board meeting was scheduled to end. The lobby was all glass and steel and the quiet hush of serious money. The security guard gave them a skeptical look when Ethan explained they were waiting for someone, but he let them sit in the designated waiting area, a cluster of chairs arranged around a low table with architectural magazines no one ever read. Maya pulled out her homework, and Ethan pretended to read one of the magazines while his leg bounced with nervous energy. Every time the elevator chimed, his head snapped up, but it was never Lauren. 4:45 came and went, 5 o'clock, 5:15. Dad, you're making me nervous, Maya said, looking up from her math worksheet. Sorry, honey, I'm just worried about our friend. Miss Lauren is going to be okay. She's brave, remember? You told her she was brave. Being brave doesn't always mean things work out the way you want them to. No, but it means you tried, and trying matters even when you don't win. Sometimes his daughter's wisdom knocked the breath out of him. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more when I say things that help you feel better. At 5:30, the elevator finally chimed and Lauren stepped out. Ethan was on his feet immediately, trying to read her expression, trying to determine from her body language whether he should be preparing congratulations or condolences. But her face was carefully neutral, professionally composed, giving nothing away. Then she saw them, and her composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, her mouth trembled, and she covered her face with both hands. Ethan's heart sank. They'd voted her out. After everything, Richard had won, had convinced enough board members that Lauren's vulnerability was a liability rather than a strength. He started toward her, already planning what he'd say, how he'd help her through this. But when Lauren lowered her hands, she was smiling. Crying and smiling at the same time, her whole face transformed with something that looked like disbelief and relief and joy, all tangled together. I'm still CEO, she said, her voice breaking. I gave my statement, and Richard tried to tear it apart, tried to make it sound like I was having a breakdown, tried to convince them I was a risk. But Elizabeth stood up and said that any leader brave enough to be honest about struggling with mental health was exactly the kind of leader she wanted running the company, and Marcus agreed. And then Jennifer, who I thought would side with Richard, said she'd been in therapy for years, and if the board was going to start firing people for taking care of their mental health, they should start with half the executives in the building. She laughed, but it was edged with hysteria. The vote was 8-4 in my favor. Richard is furious. He stormed out saying I'd destroyed my credibility, that I'd regret making my private struggles public, but I don't care. I don't care because I told the truth, and they chose to believe in me anyway. Maya had abandoned her homework and was standing next to Ethan now, watching Lauren with serious eyes. Does this mean you get to keep your job? Yes, sweetheart. I get to keep my job. Good. Because you're good at your job, and also you're teaching me to paint, and it would be sad if you had to stop because some mean man was being mean. Lauren laughed again, and this time it was pure and genuine. She crossed the lobby and knelt down in front of Maya, looking at her eye level. You're absolutely right. It would have been very sad, but I didn't have to stop, and do you know why? Why? Because I had people who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I had your dad who stayed on the phone with me all night when I was scared. I had you who reminded me that being brave is important. And I had myself, finally, who was brave enough to tell the truth instead of hiding behind walls. She stood, looking at Ethan, and he saw something new in her eyes. Not just relief, not just joy, but a kind of tentative hope, a willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world could surprise her in good ways. Can I buy you both dinner? She asked. A celebration. Nothing fancy, just, I don't want to be alone right now. I want to be with people who know the truth about me and care anyway. We'd love to, Ethan said. They went to a diner 3 blocks away, the kind of place that was completely at odds with Lauren's usual environment, but perfect for the moment. They crammed into a booth, Maya between them, and ordered more food than they could possibly eat. Lauren told them about the meeting in detail, about the way her voice had shaken at first but grown steadier, about Richard's attacks and Elizabeth's defense, about the moment when she'd realized the vote was going to go in her favor. I thought I'd feel triumphant, she said, picking at her fries. I thought if I won, if they voted to keep me, I'd feel vindicated or powerful or something. But instead I just feel relieved and grateful and a little bit terrified that this is real, that I actually did what I've been most afraid of and survived it. More than survived it, Ethan pointed out. You turned it into a strength. You changed the narrative. Maybe. Or maybe I just got lucky that enough board members had their own experiences with mental health to understand. Maybe in a different boardroom with different people, Richard would have won. But he didn't win in your boardroom with your people. And that matters. Maya had finished her chicken fingers and was now eyeing Lauren's untouched milkshake. Miss Lauren, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Are you going to stop being sad now that the mean man didn't win? Lauren's expression softened. I'm going to keep working on being less sad. But sadness isn't something that just goes away because one good thing happens. It's something I'll probably be working on for a long time. Like my physical therapy? Exactly like your physical therapy. Some things take a long time to get better, and you have to keep working at them even when it's hard. But you'll keep working at it. You won't give up? I won't give up, Lauren promised, and Ethan heard the weight of that promise, heard her making it to herself as much as to Maya. They finished dinner as the diner filled with the evening crowd, the noise and warmth creating a cocoon around their booth. When they finally left, stepping out into the November cold, Lauren hesitated on the sidewalk. I don't want to go back to my apartment alone, she admitted. I know that sounds weak. I know I should be able to celebrate this victory by myself, but it doesn't sound weak, Ethan interrupted. It sounds human. You just went through something incredibly stressful, and you want company while you decompress. That's normal. Would you both come over? Just for a little while? I promise I'll let you go home at a reasonable hour. They went back to the penthouse, and this time there was no awkwardness, no careful negotiation of boundaries. Maya immediately went to the painting supplies and started working on what she declared would be a celebration painting. Lauren put on music, something classical and soothing, and she and Ethan sat on the couch watching Maya paint with fierce concentration. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Lauren said quietly, for the relief to wear off and the fear to come back. It probably will come back, Ethan said honestly. Fear doesn't just disappear because you won one battle, but each time you face it and survive, it gets a little smaller, a little less powerful. Is that what happened for you? After Sarah died, after Maya got sick, did the fear get smaller? Eventually. It took a long time, and there are still days when it feels just as big as it ever was. But most days now, I can look at it and recognize it for what it is. A feeling, not a fact. Something I experience but don't have to be controlled by. Lauren leaned her head against his shoulder, the gesture casual and comfortable, and Ethan felt his heart do that complicated thing again, that tangle of wanting and restraint, of caring and respecting her boundaries. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For jumping into the river, for staying on the phone, for believing I could do this even when I didn't believe it myself. You did the hard part. I just stood nearby and reminded you that you could. That's not a small thing. Being reminded that you can do hard things when you're convinced you can't, that's actually everything." They sat in silence, watching Maya paint, listening to the music, existing in the peaceful aftermath of crisis survived. And Ethan thought about how far they'd both come in 3 months. How much had changed since that October evening by the river. How much more might change if they just kept showing up for each other, kept choosing honesty over hiding, kept believing that broken people could heal without erasing the cracks that made them human. Eventually, Maya's painting was finished, a riot of celebration colors that somehow captured joy in abstract form, and Lauren hung it on her refrigerator with the care usually reserved for museum pieces. Eventually, Ethan had to take his daughter home to bed, had to return to the ordinary world of school nights and early mornings, and the practical concerns of keeping a life running. But as he and Maya left the penthouse, as they rode the elevator down through all those floors, Ethan carried with him the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted. Lauren had faced her greatest fear and survived it. She'd chosen vulnerability over invincibility and found that the world didn't destroy her for it. It was a beginning, not an ending. There would be more struggles, more moments of doubt, more times when the darkness came back and threatened to pull her under. But she'd proven to herself that she could face those moments and come through them. She'd proven that asking for help wasn't fatal, that being seen wasn't the same as being destroyed, that strength looked different than she'd always imagined. And Ethan had been there to witness it, to be part of her support system, to show her through his steady presence that some people really do stay, even when staying gets complicated. It was more than he'd bargained for when he jumped into that river. It was better than he'd imagined possible. It was exactly what both of them needed, even if neither of them had known it until they found it. Winter arrived with a kind of quiet insistence that transformed the city overnight. The first real snow falling in mid-December and covering everything in white that turned gray by afternoon. Ethan stood at the warehouse loading dock, watching it come down, his breath fogging in the cold air, his phone buzzing with the now familiar rhythm of Lauren's morning text. "Therapy at 9? Board presentation at 11? Dinner with you and Maya tonight if you're free?" He smiled and typed back, "We're free. Maya's been asking when we get to see you again." "Just Maya?" His fingers hovered over the keyboard, considering honesty, considering the careful boundaries they'd maintained for 3 months now, considering whether it was time to acknowledge that what he felt had evolved beyond friendship into something more complicated, more terrifying, more real. "Not just Maya," he typed finally, then hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came immediately. "Good, because it's not just Maya I want to see either." Ethan stared at the message, his heart doing acrobatics in his chest, trying to parse what she meant. Whether this was the beginning of something shifting or just an acknowledgement of the friendship they'd built. Before he could formulate a response, another message arrived. "Can we talk tonight? Really talk? There's something I need to tell you." The rest of his shift passed in a haze of distraction and speculation. Lauren had been doing so much better lately. Her nightmares had decreased. She'd started painting regularly. She'd even mentioned possibly cutting back her hours at work to focus more on having an actual life. But there was still fragility there. Still moments when the darkness crept back in and she had to fight it off with all the tools her therapist had given her. What if she was struggling again? What if the board situation had been more damaging than she'd let on? What if she needed more help than he knew how to give? He picked Maya up from school with these thoughts circling his mind like worried birds, barely listening as she chattered about her day, about the art project she'd made, about the friend who'd invited her to a birthday party next weekend. "Dad, you're not listening," Maya said, her voice carrying that particular note of 7-year-old indignation. "Sorry, honey, I'm just thinking about tonight." "About seeing Miss Lauren?" Yeah. Are you worried about her? He glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, marveling at her perceptiveness. A little bit. She said she needs to talk to me about something, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something good, Maya offered. Not everything that's important is bad, you know. Sometimes important things are good things that you're nervous about because they might change everything. Out of the mouths of babes. Again. When did you get so wise about feelings? I pay attention, and also Mrs. Chen talks to me about stuff when you're at work. She says paying attention to feelings is how you know what's real and what's just fear trying to trick you. Mrs. Chen is a very smart woman. They arrived at Lauren's building at 6, snow still falling in lazy spirals, the city taking on that muffled quality that came with accumulation. The doorman greeted them by name now, waving them through to the elevator without question. They'd become familiar fixtures over the past months, the single dad and his daughter who visited the penthouse CEO with increasing regularity. Lauren opened the door before they could knock, and Ethan immediately cataloged her appearance, looking for signs of distress. But she looked good. Better than good, actually. There was color in her cheeks, light in her eyes, an energy about her that he hadn't seen before. She'd let her hair down, was wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft and comfortable, and her smile when she saw them was genuine and warm. "Hi," she said, and there was something breathless in the word, something that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "Hi yourself." Maya barreled past him into a hug, chattering about school and snow and the painting she wanted to make tonight, and Lauren listened with patient attention, asking questions and laughing at Maya's dramatic retelling of the lunchroom incident involving spilled chocolate milk and a very upset teacher. They had dinner, pizza this time, because Maya had requested it and Lauren had agreed that sometimes simple was better. And the conversation flowed easily, comfortably, with the kind of rhythm that came from months of practice. But Ethan could feel an undercurrent, a tension that wasn't quite anxiety but wasn't quite ease either. Lauren kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression complicated with something he couldn't quite read. After dinner, Maya settled in with her painting supplies, and Lauren gestured Ethan toward the balcony. He followed, stepping out into the cold evening air, the city spread below them, glittering with lights and fresh snow. "It's freezing out here," he observed, his breath fogging. "I know, but I needed somewhere Maya couldn't hear us, and this was the best option." Lauren wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the city. "I've been thinking a lot about that question you asked me months ago, about whether I'd stay if I really saw myself. And I've been doing a lot of seeing, a lot of really hard, painful seeing. In therapy, I've been working through the fire, through losing my parents, through all the years I spent building walls to protect myself from ever feeling that vulnerable again." She turned to face him, her back against the railing. "And I've realized something important." Ethan waited, giving her space to find the words. "I've realized that I didn't just build walls against pain. I built walls against everything, joy, connection, love, all of it. I was so convinced that caring about people meant setting myself up for devastating loss that I decided it was safer to care about nothing and no one. To be successful, but empty. Accomplished, but alone." "Past tense?" Ethan asked carefully. "Past tense," she confirmed, "because 3 months ago, someone jumped into a river to save me, and then he refused to let me go back to being alone. He kept calling, kept checking in, kept showing up with his daughter, who asked uncomfortable questions and gave me crayon drawings and somehow convinced me that maybe being seen wasn't the same as being destroyed." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You asked me if I'd stay if I really saw myself," Lauren continued, "and the answer is yes. I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing to keep doing the hard work of healing instead of giving up. I'm choosing to believe that I'm worth the effort, that life can be more than just endurance, that there are things worth staying for." "I'm glad," Ethan said quietly. "I'm so glad you're choosing that. But there's more." She took a step closer to him. "There's something else I need to say, and it's terrifying, but my therapist says I need to practice being honest about what I want instead of assuming people will reject me." Ethan's heart was pounding now, loud enough that he wondered if she could hear it. "I know I told you I needed this to be friendship. I know I said I wasn't ready for anything more. And for months, that was true. I needed time to figure out who I was outside of my depression, outside of my trauma, outside of the CEO role that defined me for so long. She was looking directly at him now, her gray eyes steady despite the fear he could see in them. But somewhere along the way, friendship stopped being enough. Somewhere between the late-night phone calls and the dinner conversations and watching you be an incredible father to Maya, I started wanting more. Lauren, let me finish, please. Because if I don't say this now, I might lose my courage. She took a shaky breath. I'm falling in love with you, Ethan. Maybe I've been falling this whole time and just didn't recognize it because I've never really been in love before, never let myself care about someone enough to call it that. But I care about you. I care about Maya. I care about the life you've built despite all the hardship, about the way you show up for people, about the quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself. She paused, and he could see her gathering herself for the hardest part. And I know this is complicated. I know you have Maya to think about. And I know I'm still a work in progress, still figuring out how to be a functional human instead of just a functional executive. I know I might not be what you need or want, and if you don't feel the same way, if you want to keep this as friendship, I'll understand. I'll respect that. But my therapist says I need to practice being vulnerable about what I want, and what I want is you. Both of you. In my life in a way that's more than just occasional dinners and check-in texts. She stopped, breathless, terrified, waiting for his response. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw everything she'd become over these months. Saw the woman who'd stood at a railing ready to give up, and the woman who now stood in front of him choosing hope. Saw the CEO who'd faced down her board, and the person who painted watercolors and called him crying at 2 a.m. Saw all the broken pieces and all the beautiful ways she was learning to hold them together. I need to tell you something too, he said quietly. Something I've been holding back because I was trying to respect your boundaries, trying to give you space to heal without the pressure of my feelings. What? I've been in love with you since that first weekend, when you sat on your bed unable to unbutton your shirt because your hands were shaking so badly, and you let me help anyway. When you asked me if I'd stay if I really saw you, and I realized that I wanted to see all of you, wanted to know every complicated, difficult, beautiful part of who you were. Lauren's hand came up to cover her mouth, her eyes going wide. I've been in love with you through every phone call and every dinner and every moment of watching you do the hard work of healing, Ethan continued. I've been in love with the way you are with Maya, the way you take her seriously, the way you let her teach you about feelings and bravery. I've been in love with your honesty, your courage, your willingness to keep trying even when everything in you wants to give up. He reached out and took her hand, the same way he'd done that first night, and she gripped it like a lifeline. But I need you to understand something, he said. I come with a daughter who has medical complications and will probably need support for the rest of her life. I come with a financial situation that's precarious at best. I come with grief and trauma and my own baggage that I'm still working through. I'm not some perfect solution to your loneliness. I'm just a guy who works in a warehouse and does his best to be a good dad, and sometimes falls short of that goal. You're not just anything, Lauren said fiercely. You're the person who saved my life, and then kept saving it every day since. You're the person who shows up, who stays, who sees me at my worst and doesn't run. You're exactly what I need, Ethan. You and Maya both. Then we need to talk about what this looks like practically, Ethan said, because I won't put Maya through the instability of a relationship that might not work. She's been through too much already. If we do this, if we move forward into something more than friendship, we need to be sure. We need to be committed to making it work even when it's hard. I'm sure, Lauren said without hesitation. I'm more sure of this than I've been of anything in years. But I understand about Maya. I would never want to hurt her or make her life more complicated. So we go slow. We make sure she's okay with this changing. We build something stable and real instead of rushing into something we're not ready for. Slow I can do, committed I can do. But Lauren, he cupped her face with his free hand, making sure she was really hearing him. I need you to promise me something. I need you to promise that if the depression comes back, if you start having those thoughts again, you'll tell me. You'll reach out before it gets critical. Because if we do this, if we build a life together, I need to know you'll let me be there for the hard times, not just the good ones. I promise, she said. I promise I'll reach out. I promise I'll keep doing the work, keep going to therapy, keep taking my medication, keep choosing to stay even when staying is hard. Because now I have more reasons to stay. Now I have you and Maya and the possibility of something I never let myself believe I could have. What's that? A family, she whispered. People who love me not for what I do or what I've accomplished, but for who I am underneath all of that. People who see my scars, the visible ones and the invisible ones, and think they make me more beautiful, not less. Ethan pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest, her whole body shaking with emotion. He held her there on the balcony while snow fell around them and the city glittered below, held her while she cried tears that were equal parts relief and joy and terror at this new vulnerability she was choosing. "I'm scared," she admitted against his chest. "Me too. But we'll figure it out together." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other in the cold, before the sound of the balcony door sliding open made them pull apart. Maya stood in the doorway, her expression serious. "Are you kissing out here? Because if you are, you should come inside where it's warm. Also, I finished my painting, and I want to show you both." Lauren laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "We weren't kissing, not yet anyway. But you're going to, right? Because Dad has that look he gets when he really likes someone, and you have that look too. And Mrs. Chen says when two people have that look, they should probably kiss and then talk about their feelings." "Mrs. Chen has a lot of opinions about feelings," Ethan observed. "That's because she's smart about them." Maya grabbed Lauren's hand and pulled her toward the door. "Come see my painting. It's about families." They went inside and Maya presented her work with the pride of someone unveiling a masterpiece. It was abstract, like most of her paintings, but there were 3 distinct figures rendered in different colors, blue and green and purple, all connected by swirls of other colors that might have been anything or might have been love made visible. "This is us," Maya explained, pointing to each figure. "Dad is blue because that's his favorite color. I'm green because I like green best. And Miss Lauren is purple because purple is brave and beautiful and a little bit sad sometimes, but in a way that makes it more special." Lauren's eyes filled with tears again. "It's perfect, sweetheart." "I know. Can we hang it on your refrigerator like you did with my last one?" "Absolutely." They hung the painting, and then Maya declared it was time for dessert, and they ate ice cream in the living room while snow continued to fall outside. Eventually, Maya's eyes started to droop, the excitement of the evening catching up with her, and Ethan carried her to the guest room that had become familiar territory over the months. "Is Miss Lauren going to be my family now?" Maya asked sleepily as he tucked her in. "Like real family, not just friend family?" "Would you like that?" "I would like that a lot. She's nice and she understands about being scared, and she lets me paint even when I make a mess, and she makes you smile the way you used to smile in pictures with Mom." Ethan's throat tightened. "You remember those pictures?" "A little bit. Mrs. Chen showed me some once when you were at work. You looked happy in them. And you look happy now when you're with Miss Lauren. I like when you're happy. I like when you're happy too, sweetheart. Then we should all be happy together. That makes the most sense." If only all of life's complications could be solved with 7-year-old logic. Ethan kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked the way she preferred. When he returned to the living room, he found Lauren curled up on the couch, staring at Maya's painting on the refrigerator with an expression that was equal parts wonder and disbelief. "She's remarkable," Lauren said without looking away from the painting. "The way she just accepts things, decides how the world should be, and then acts accordingly. That's Maya. She doesn't waste time on what-ifs when the what-is right in front of her. I wish I could be more like that." Lauren finally turned to look at him. "I've spent so much of my life trapped in what-ifs, in catastrophic thinking about everything that could go wrong. It's exhausting." Ethan sat down next to her, close enough to touch, but not quite touching, giving her space to choose. She closed the distance, leaning against him the way she had on the balcony, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. "My therapist and I have been talking about what comes next," she said quietly. "About what my life looks like now, that I'm not just surviving but actually trying to build something worth living for." "What does it look like?" "I don't know yet. But I know it includes you and Maya if you'll have me. I know it includes more painting and fewer 18-hour work days. I know it includes being honest about my struggles instead of hiding them. I know it includes building connections instead of building walls. She tilted her head to look up at him. I want to meet Mrs. Chen. I want to see your apartment and understand your life instead of always having you come to mine. I want to be at Maya's physical therapy appointments and school events and all the normal things that make up a family's life. I want to be part of your world, not just have you visit mine. My world is a lot less glamorous than yours, Ethan warned. It's a one-bedroom apartment in a building that's seen better days. It's community centers and public libraries and dollar stores. It's making choices based on what we can afford instead of what we want. Good. Because my world has been suffocating me for 20 years. I want messy and real and human. I want Saturday mornings at the library and community centers and making choices based on what matters instead of what impresses people. You might be romanticizing poverty a little bit. Maybe, but I'm not romanticizing connection. I'm not romanticizing having people who matter more than profit margins. I'm not romanticizing the possibility of being part of something that feels real instead of performing a role for an audience that doesn't actually care about me. Ethan couldn't argue with that. He'd spent years thinking his life was somehow less valuable because it lacked financial security, lacked prestige, lacked all the markers of success that people like Lauren had achieved. But she was looking at his life and seeing value he'd stopped recognizing. The richness of connection, the depth of purpose, the meaning that came from showing up for people you loved. So, what's the plan? He asked. How do we do this in a way that's healthy for everyone? Slow, like you said. We keep doing what we've been doing, dinners, phone calls, spending time together, but we're honest about what it is now. We tell Maya that we care about each other in a grown-up way and see how she responds. We introduce me to your world the way you've been part of mine. We go to therapy, both of us, individually and maybe together eventually, to make sure we're building something sustainable. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. And in a few months, if things are going well, if Maya is comfortable and you're comfortable and I'm managing my mental health effectively, we talk about what it would look like for this to be permanent. For us to be a real family, not just people who care about each other, but people who build a life together. That's a lot of steps. I know. But I want to do this right. I want to prove to myself and to you that I can be a partner, not a burden. That I can show up for you and Maya the way you've shown up for me. That I can be stable and present in all the things I've never been before. Ethan turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Lauren, listen to me. You're already showing up. You've been showing up since that first weekend when you let us stay. When you chose to be vulnerable instead of pretending you were fine. You've been showing up every time you call when you're struggling instead of suffering alone. You've been showing up every time you do the hard work of therapy, every time you paint because it brings you joy, every time you choose to stay when leaving would be easier. But what if I'm not enough? What if I can't be the kind of partner you need? What if my depression comes back and then we deal with it together? That's what partners do. They show up for each other's struggles, not just their successes. They love each other through the hard times, not just the easy ones. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. I'm not expecting you to be perfect, Lauren. I'm expecting you to be human, to keep doing the work, to keep being honest, to keep choosing to stay. That's all I need. That's enough. What if it's not? What if someday you wake up and realize I'm too complicated, too damaged, too much work? Then I'll tell you that everyone is complicated and damaged and work. That's what people are. But some people are worth it, and you're worth it, and I'm choosing you anyway. She kissed him then, closing the distance between them with a kind of desperate urgency, and Ethan kissed her back, pouring months of wanting and restraint and love into the contact. It was gentle and fierce all at once, a promise and a question and an answer all tangled together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lauren was crying again, but she was smiling too. I can't believe this is real, she whispered. I can't believe I get to have this. Believe it, because it's real, and you deserve it, and we're going to figure out how to make it work. They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming about possibilities and occasionally kissing like teenagers discovering something new and wonderful. They talked about Lauren potentially cutting back her hours at work, about Ethan maybe going back to school to finish the degree he'd abandoned when Maya got sick, about what it would mean to build a life together that honored both their needs and their limitations. Eventually, exhaustion won, and they fell asleep on the couch tangled together, the city lights creating patterns on the walls and snow still falling outside. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about their situation was perfect, but it was real and honest and full of possibility. Ethan woke to Maya's voice. "Dad, you and Miss Lauren fell asleep on the couch. Also, it snowed a lot, and I think we should make snow angels later." He opened his eyes to find his daughter standing next to the couch, completely unfazed by finding them sleeping together, already planning the day ahead. "Morning, sweetheart." "Morning. Are you and Miss Lauren boyfriend and girlfriend now? Because Mrs. Chen says when grown-ups sleep on the couch together, that usually means they like each other in the special way." Lauren stirred against him, waking slowly, and Ethan felt her tense slightly at Maya's question. "We are," he said carefully, watching his daughter's reaction. "Is that okay with you?" Maya considered this seriously. "Does it mean we get to see Miss Lauren more often?" "If you want to, yes." "And does it mean she might come to my physical therapy sometimes and my school stuff?" "If that's something you'd like." "And does it mean someday we might all live together like a real family?" Lauren had fully woken now, propped up on one elbow, watching Maya with careful attention. "Maybe someday," Ethan said. "If everyone wants that and if it makes sense for all of us." Maya nodded, processing this information with the gravity it deserved. Then she smiled, bright and genuine. "Okay, I think that's good. Miss Lauren is nice and she needs people to love her because she's been alone for too long. And we're good at loving people, so it makes sense." "Just like that?" Lauren asked, her voice still thick with sleep. "Just like that," Maya confirmed. "Why make it complicated when it doesn't have to be? You love each other. I love both of you. You both love me. That's what families are. The rest is just details." She skipped off toward the kitchen, calling back over her shoulder. "I'm going to make toast. Miss Lauren, do you have peanut butter?" Ethan and Lauren looked at each other and started laughing, the kind of laughter that was part relief and part disbelief and part pure joy at the absurdity and beauty of how easy it could be if you just let it. The months that followed weren't always easy. Lauren had rough days when the depression came back and she had to fight her way through it with therapy and medication and the support system she'd built. Ethan had moments of doubt about whether he could be what she needed, whether their different worlds could really merge into something cohesive. Maya had her own struggles with physical therapy and the ongoing challenges of her condition, but they showed up for each other. Every time. Lauren came to Maya's therapy appointments and school conferences. Ethan met her board members and learned to navigate the corporate world that was so different from his own. Maya taught them both about resilience and joy and the importance of celebrating small victories. Lauren cut back her hours at work and joined the board of a mental health advocacy organization, using her story to push for better support and less stigma. Ethan started taking night classes to finish his degree, with Lauren's encouragement and sometimes her help with assignments. They had family dinners 3 times a week, alternating between Lauren's penthouse and their small apartment, learning that home was about people, not places. By the following October, exactly 1 year after the night at the river, they stood on that same path with Maya between them, looking at the water that had almost taken Lauren's life and instead had given all of them something worth living for. "It's strange being back here," Lauren said quietly. "Remembering that night, remembering who I was then." "Who were you then?" Maya asked. "Someone who thought being alone was safer than being connected. Someone who thought strength meant never needing anyone. Someone who couldn't see a reason to keep fighting. And now?" Lauren looked at Ethan, then down at Maya, then back at the river. "Now I'm someone who knows that strength is asking for help when you need it. Someone who understands that connection is worth the risk of loss. Someone who has so many reasons to keep fighting that I can't imagine ever being that desperate again." "Does that mean you're not sad anymore?" Maya asked with characteristic directness. "No, sweetheart. I still have sad days, but I have more happy days now." And on the sad days, I have people who help me through them instead of facing them alone. They walked along the path, the three of them, talking about the year that had passed and the future they were building. When they returned to the spot where it had all started, Lauren turned to Ethan with an expression he'd never seen before, completely open, completely unguarded, showing him everything she felt without fear. "I need to ask you something," she said, reaching into her pocket. Ethan's heart stopped. "Lauren, I know this isn't traditional. I know usually the man asks the woman. But my therapist says I should practice asking for what I want, and what I want is to build a life with you and Maya officially, legally, permanently." She pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a simple band. "I know we've only been together for a year, and I know that's fast by some standards, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Will you marry me, Ethan? Will you let me be Maya's family, not just in our hearts, but in every way that matters?" Maya gasped with delight, bouncing on her toes. "Say yes, Dad. Say yes." Ethan looked at Lauren, at this woman who'd transformed from someone ready to give up into someone brave enough to ask for forever, and felt his chest fill with so much love it almost hurt. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, we'll build a life together. Yes to all of it." She kissed him there on the path, with Maya cheering and jumping around them, with the river flowing past, carrying none of the darkness it had held a year ago. When they broke apart, Lauren knelt down to Maya's level. "I have something for you too," she said, pulling out a second box. Inside was a delicate necklace with a small pendant, a watercolor flower preserved somehow in resin. "This is from the first painting we made together. I had it turned into a necklace because I wanted you to have something that reminds you that you're part of this family, not just because of me and your dad, but because you chose to be. Because you were brave enough to let me into your life and teach me how to be part of a family." Maya's eyes went wide. "It's beautiful. Can I put it on?" "Of course." Lauren fastened the necklace, and Maya immediately started showing it to her father, to the few other people on the path, to the river itself, as if it might appreciate the beauty of a preserved painting turned jewelry. They walked home together as the evening light began to fade, talking about wedding plans and logistics and all the practical details of combining their lives fully. They talked about Lauren selling the penthouse and finding something that felt like home for all three of them, something with space for painting and homework and the messy, beautiful chaos of family life. They talked about Maya being part of the ceremony, about making it a celebration of all three of them choosing each other. That night, after Maya was asleep in the guest room of Lauren's penthouse, soon to be their last months in this space, Ethan and Lauren stood at the windows looking out at the city. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "Marriage is permanent. Family is permanent. If I mess this up, if my depression gets bad again, if I can't be the partner and mother figure you and Maya need, then we'll figure it out together. That's what permanent means. It means we don't run when things get hard. It means we choose each other on the bad days as much as the good ones. I've never had permanent before, not since my parents died. I don't know if I remember how to trust it." "Then we'll practice. Every day we'll practice trusting that this is real, that we're not going anywhere, that you're safe with us." Lauren leaned into him, and they stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city that had witnessed her lowest moment and was now witnessing something entirely new, the beginning of a life built on honesty, vulnerability, and the radical choice to stay even when staying was terrifying. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For jumping into the river, for staying on the phone at 2 a.m, for believing I could be more than my worst moment, for seeing me, really seeing me, all the broken pieces and sharp edges, and choosing to love me anyway. Thank you for letting me, for being brave enough to be seen, for doing the work even when it was hard, for choosing to build something with us instead of staying safe behind your walls." "I don't think I could go back to those walls even if I wanted to," Lauren said. "Not now that I know what it's like to be loved for who I actually am instead of what I pretend to be. Not now that I have you and Maya showing me every day that vulnerability isn't fatal, that connection is worth the risk, that family is about choosing to show up for each other." They stood there until the city lights blurred into constellations, until the temperature dropped enough to drive them inside, until Maya called out from the guest room asking for water and one more bedtime story. And Ethan thought about that October night when he jumped into freezing water without hesitation, driven by the simple certainty that saving someone's life was worth any risk. He thought then that the rescue was complete when he pulled her to shore, when her heart started beating again, when she opened her eyes and came back from wherever she'd been. But he understood now that the rescue had been ongoing, that it happened in phone calls and therapy sessions, and moments of choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. That it happened when Lauren chose to tell her truth to her board, when she asked for what she wanted instead of assuming rejection, when she opened the small box and asked him to build forever with her. The rescue was reciprocal too, because Lauren had saved him just as surely as he'd saved her, saved him from a life of just surviving, just getting through each day without hope for something more. She'd reminded him that he was more than his circumstances, that his life had value beyond his function as Maya's father, that he was worthy of being chosen and loved and celebrated. They'd saved each other, really, and they'd keep saving each other, day after day, choice after choice, moment after moment of showing up and staying and refusing to let fear win. That was what love was, Ethan realized. Not the absence of fear or pain or struggle, but the choice to face those things together instead of alone. Not perfection, but presence. Not invulnerability, but the courage to be vulnerable anyway. And as he climbed into bed next to Lauren that night, as she curled into him with the trust of someone who finally believed she was safe, as Maya's soft breathing filtered in from the other room, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Whole. Home. Not because everything was perfect, but because he'd found people who loved him through the imperfect parts. Not because the struggles had ended, but because he had partners to face them with. Not because he'd stopped being scared, but because love had given him reasons to be brave. The river had almost taken Lauren from the world. Instead, it had brought all three of them together, had created a family from broken pieces, had turned a moment of desperation into a lifetime of choosing each other. And that, Ethan thought, as sleep finally claimed him, was the real rescue. Not pulling someone from water, but helping them find reasons to keep swimming. Not saving someone from death, but showing them what life could be when you stopped running from it. They'd all been drowning in different ways before they found each other. Now they were learning to swim together, supporting each other through the currents, celebrating the moments when the water was calm, holding tight when the waves threatened to pull them under. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it, and that made all the difference.